that we don't see a mage, because I really like the mage strategy that Jack was just talking about with the ring coming out, and I'm pretty sure Supreme knows how to play mage as well, right? So there's in theory the possibility of them pulling it out, but they don't, as they both pull the boss and a bunch of mobs on top of it with committing the bloodlust.
Yeah, well, this is actually kind of surprising because we're not seeing like the big pull we saw out of the higher end teams in the Western region last weekend. So I remember we saw like 2.3 million DPS coming out from Ashad because they pulled so many of these crabs with the boss. Now, of course, the FXs were a little more forgiving last week as well. They didn't have raging. If all of these crabs rage at the same time and start squeezing people, we could see some instant deaths coming out for people. So it makes sense that they're going for a smaller pull. On the note of Supreme playing mage, like, yeah, he does play mage, but I feel like DK is just so valuable in this dungeon with the mass pulls that you're doing, especially around the cannons. The amount of like damage they can do just on top of also having the cannon damage seems really valuable, especially once you're kind of just trying to finish off the lingering mobs when you don't have any cannon shots left. I think it's super valuable there as well. So it makes sense that he's sticking to the DK. I would have liked to see one of the other DPS, maybe the monk swap to a mage, but you know, maybe he just doesn't have that in his toolkit.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, all of the classes are pretty valuable in this dungeon, right? The monk provides the Ring of Peace, which is very useful for the cannon part as well. I guess doesn't matter if you have Ring of Peace or the Mage Ring. I guess both of them provide the same kind of utility in the end. I mean, you have more Frost Novas from a Mage, but Ring of Peace is just so good because it procs multiple times in a row, in my opinion. And then you kind of need the Rogue, right? Because you need to open the cages and everything like that. They, in theory, have professions available to them. Theoretically, they have blacksmithing, so they will be able to open the cages even without a Rogue. But they still just have it for utility and stealth, and generally just, you know, Shroud and all that other stuff that Rogue provides.
I like what we're seeing from Buff or Nerf. They pulled a second pack of the Silk Crabs on top of the boss, so they're getting a little bit more AoE damage out from that Unholy DK on single target, and they're all just providing, you know, extra cleave targets for the Rogue. Now, that being said, there are plenty of cleave targets available on this fight that the boss spawns in the form of those buzzing drones, but, you know, just a little bit of extra cleave, and you can see all those crabs are raging at the same time. They do have AoE stuns go out right away, just so none of those squeezes get off on players in the group, so they're pretty safe with how they're doing this pull, but I like that, just getting a little bit of extra percentage out on the boss, and the boss is going down first for them while also being a percent ahead, so, you know, pretty strong pathing from them so far here.
Yeah, we see there's a Void Touch Emissary right as they enter this area, but they're not going to kill it. They're just going to go past, and later on they will use their Shadow Melt to de-aggro. We see Supreme actually already popping the Shadow Melt. I'm not completely sure if he's going to be able to get past here without... Oh no, it just now got ready, never mind. So he will have the Shadow Melt ready to de-aggro not only the trash that they pulled on the way up, but also de-aggro the Void Emissary that they passed earlier. And Black Mamba seem to be doing the exact same thing.
Something I'm interested to see here as well is we know especially from last week when we saw some mistakes, that the time trial times in Tol Dagor are not necessarily, you know, indicative of how you can play this dungeon. I mean, Abracadabra and Methodea both had ridiculously good times in this dungeon. We're talking 13 minutes, 13:50, but they weren't able to pull off those times in practice. There's also a chance that with how volatile the strategy of having DPS go inside the top floor and pull things out to the cannons, that maybe they just weren't able to pull off their strategy, and those 5 attempts in 17 minutes was the best attempt they could have. So maybe Buff Nerf Rogue and Black Mamba can pull out some faster times here than what we saw from them in time trials.
Yeah, definitely a possibility. We see Moon unfortunately going down for Black Mamba. Seems like something went wrong with a skip they were doing. Either Moon aggroed something that he was not supposed to aggro while opening the cages, possibly in the first floor. So in the first floor there's 4 cages you can open, and you will get 1 out of 4 random buffs. Usually teams in the past would only open the 2 on the right, and then they would just take the buffs that they're there. They didn't spend the time to go to the left cages. Now Black Mamba and Buff were both pulling Jess Howlis through the cage here, through the gate, which is something we've seen a lot from other teams as well.
Yep, they used the Flying Serpent Kick from their Windwalker Monk to go ahead and pull Jess through the gate. The AoE damage from the end of it, I believe, pulls Jess. Could be wrong about that, but it is for sure the Flying Serpent Kick that pulls Jess through the cage, so that's how these teams are doing that. I believe in beta they used Divine Star, but unfortunately on the side of Black Mamba, 3 deaths already on their side. It looks like Envious is going to go ahead and try to... No, they don't have Shadow Melt available, so this is likely going to be... Well, yeah, there's no way they're going to finish this boss off. There's going to be a full team wipe from them. Unfortunate, and I didn't quite see what happened there, but it really wouldn't surprise me if they wiped once again, as we see in this corner many times, to explosives.
Yeah, so Explosive seems to be causing lots and lots of trouble, especially in Just Howlers. We've seen multiple teams struggle with this, especially because, I mean, you pull Just Howlers through the wall, and then on top of Just Howlers, you also get so many other mobs that you have to deal with, and then you have all of those explosives, you need to interrupt all of those abilities. There's just so many things to handle at the same time. And look at Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue. Look at how many explosives they're getting here as well, and how many mobs they have up. They're in phase 2 now, so they have Bobby that they need to interrupt the boss, and they need to deal with all the explosives and all the other mob, the arsonists. So much tank damage on top of having the explosive. Once all of those start raging, all of those arsonists, the debuff that Jing has on him from the arsonists will actually increase doing damage as well. Now, fortunately, the arsonists actually also run away when they're low HP, so it's actually helping them out here with the raging.
Ooh, that explosive almost got off for Buff Warner. That would have been a little bit dangerous there at the timing of the fight. But once these arsonists go down, the raging is all gone, and most of the explosive spawning mobs are gone. They only have the 2 boss mobs left, so they should be able to completely deal with this. And it looks like, yeah, Buff Warner Rogue has successfully traversed this perilous Just Howlers corner that we've seen so many good teams wipe to. It's just a really dangerous section of the dungeon, especially on explosive. Like, we mentioned it before the dungeon. I think we've seen explosive in Tol Dagor. This is the 7th time, I think, throughout this year in Cup play that we've seen explosive selected as one of the affixes for this dungeon. So it's incredibly nasty in this dungeon, and to see them pull it off. I mean, they've got a lot of practice at this point too, but it's still hard to pull off.
Yeah, so Black Mamba, they actually managed to get back up to Just Howlers' room. They did pull him again through the gate, so we'll see how they do this time around. There's probably going to be less trash to have to deal with, so maybe it's going to be an easier time for them this time around, but they're out of battle rests, so if anything goes wrong, they're just going to have a full team wipe again, unless they manage to somehow have the healer Shadow Melt in a corner. Now, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, they're on their way to the cannon area. They have 25% trash only, so they're planning on getting almost all of the rest of the trash that they need in this cannon area, which means that they need to have a very good setup, because the cannons got changed, so there's only 5 shots in each cannon instead of then limited ones as we had before.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention why explosive is chosen for this dungeon so much. It's the biggest inhibitor of any time savings pulls in this dungeon. The main reasoning is you have no way of dodging explosives if you're in the cannon, and usually when you're in the cannon, your entire team is at line of sight trying to kite the mobs around some corner or some wall, so you're completely exposed when you're in the cannon and explosives are spawning, and that just makes it that much more difficult to deal with. And usually what we see teams do is they'll have a rogue in the cannon, they'll sit in the cannon until they proc their cheat death from the explosive procs, and they'll jump out, pop their Cloak of Shadows, and then they'll have 8 more seconds where they can actually live through explosives before they just go down. And at that point, there's nothing they can do to live. They're just going to die to explosive once the Cloak is gone. But that's typically the strategy we see from most teams, disregarding explosive whenever they do these large cannon pulls.
Yes, unfortunately, Black Mamba had another whole team wipe coming through on Just Howlers there. Unfortunately, Envious did not have Shadow Melt available, so he couldn't reset, and they had to just all release and go back to the boss. But at this point, they actually, oh yeah, they have to Shadow Melt ready again now, so they can go back and Shadow Melt off the aggro. We have some observer problems with Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, but let's just watch Black Mamba as they try to do Just Howlers for the 3rd time this time around.
Yep, they got back there finally this time. Well, hopefully they'll be able to deal with the explosives, but unfortunately they already have 2 deaths on the board. They already committed their Shadow Melt. Is Envy's out of combat here? No, they're just going to wipe it again. This is really unfortunate for Black Mamba, and I mean, it kind of fits with the narrative we have for Black Mamba. They're always this team that just somehow is never able to pull it together in a majority of their dungeons. They do have really good practice in some dungeons, it seems, but like it just seems like, I would say in probably 60 to 70% of their dungeons, they just don't seem that well practiced.
It's yeah, I'm not completely sure if it's practice or if it's nerfs or if they just overdoing it with their pulls, because we've seen so many times that, you know, we've talked about this multiple times. We said Black Mamba, they have the strategies, but they're just not executing them properly. So maybe their mistake is that the success chance or the success rate they have in practice is just not high enough. Maybe they only have a 50% success rate, and they're like, you know what, 50% is enough. Let's just play it in the cup. Maybe they have to rethink what kind of strategies they're pulling off in the actual cups, because as you said, almost every single dungeon they're playing, it seems like the strategy is there, but they're just wiping and struggling with the execution. Like, we saw this one shrine, for example, where it seemed like they pulled it together and actually managed to go through the dungeon, but then they ended up wiping on the last boss like 2 times or even 3 times in a row, which is just, I don't know, there's just so many small little mistakes that add up. I feel like they have to just work on their execution and maybe even try to just don't do those kind of risky pulls if you don't have it down in practice 100%.
We were talking about it yesterday in their match with Pixel, is they were pulling relatively safe, and they still had a decent amount of deaths, but they won the match because they played clean and safe in you know, in the opposite way of what you're saying, where they go for the big pulls that they clearly haven't practiced or aren't good at doing or maybe have nerves for, and they just aren't able to pull off. Now, I was going to say I'm not quite sure what they were planning on doing here, because it didn't look like they had all their shadow molds off cooldown. It looked like they just dealt with one trash pack at the start of the dungeon while they waited for their shadow mold to come off cooldown for a little, just to do something while they were waiting, so they weren't sitting at the first boss doing absolutely nothing for about a minute and a half. But they did have their shadow molds come off cooldown here, and they have pulled Jess through the wall, so let's keep an eye on those explosives and make sure they don't actually have another wipe to explosives here.
Yeah, so they're actually doing the same pull again for a third time. Now, at this point, I might have, you know, maybe I would have said, you know what, let's just do the trash first and then pull Jess Hallis, because they already wiped this twice. But I mean, yeah, Envis going down again. They have a battle rest available. Fortunately, they have a DK, so Envis can be rested, but the rest is not coming out. The DK is not resting, so one goes down as well. Just going to be another full team wipe for that. I mean, at this point, they're just going to say, let's pull the boss on its own. Let's clean the trash first, then do the boss. This is clearly just not working out for them.
I mean, why didn't the DK res there?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe he was line of sight. He didn't know where he is. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, you can get an after combat res to try to res the group after.
True.
Like, I don't understand what the thought process is there. Like, do they think they've already lost the dungeon and they just don't want to try it? Are they tilted? Have they given up? I feel like that's what it looks like. The Queen hasn't even released yet. At this point, it's the same thing as last time, where their shadow molds aren't off cooldown for another minute or so here, and they just have to wait for them before they can move through the dungeon. Maybe they'll run through and pull another mob again. And we do have buff for Nerf Rogue back on their side once again. They have dealt with most of their trash on the ledge. They're at 76%. As we know, they need to get to about, I believe, 89 by the time they engage the third boss before they're done with trash for the entire dungeon. So they're just about done before getting to the third boss. Looks like they had a very clean bridge. No deaths on the side of the board for them. So very good run for them so far.
Yeah, very unfortunate that we didn't see the bridge strategy, because I was looking forward to the cannon strat that they're pulling off, because they really had only 25% trash up until this point, which was not a lot at all. So it seems like they kill a lot of that trash with the cannons. They're up to 80% and still on 0 deaths, which is also pretty impressive, to be honest, because even the really good Western teams had some stray deaths here and there when they did the cannon part, just because explosives going off or the rogues dying inside the cannon. So the fact that they have 0 deaths here is actually pretty good.
Well, maybe this is part of their strategy. I think we saw this earlier today in the world first Ragnaros kill, where the guild that killed Ragnaros first didn't actually want their strategy shown for farming Hydraxian rep, so they didn't actually stream any of that. Maybe Buff or Nerf Rogue didn't want us to stream their bridge strat because it was, you never know, honestly. Maybe that's what it is.
That's probably it. As they actually pull the last trash group in front of the next boss they have to deal with. So they're basically done with trash. They only have this pack, which they can deal with. Oh no! The one first death coming in for Buff Winner Rogue. Actually, Jing and Supreme going down. This might actually cause some trouble. Loda does have Shadow Melt available. So in theory, you can just Shadow Melt off the aggro and rest them back up, and they can try to pull again. I do believe they still have the shots left in that cannon. At least that's what I think, because they still have to deal with this trash, and I don't think they want to deal with it without cannon shots. But either way, they're trying to stay alive, seems like.
It looks like, they full wiped and Shadow Melted to get a res off. Maybe they're just camera shy. Maybe that's what it is. Once they knew they were back on camera, they had to wipe instantly. It's really unfortunate for them. But at this point, they can have a full team wipe and still be totally fine in this dungeon. Looks like Supreme used to Shadow Melt as well there. So yeah, I believe only 3 deaths there. 5 deaths, it looks like. So a little unfortunate from them, but the biggest thing here is that they use those cannon shots on the trash, so they don't have any of the shots they used available for this trash pull, so they're going to have to be very careful with how they pull this at this point. And, if they're not exactly perfect with how they pull this trash, and they don't hit everything with all of the remaining cannon shots, it could be a little bit more dangerous for them.
Yeah, you can see how they're doing it as well. You can see Jing just being in the corner here, pulling everything together, and then he's standing so close to the corner because he wants to get ready to line of sight, right? Because the explosive will spawn, and then he can use his cooldowns to survive some of them, but then he needs to go in line of sight. So Jing, the only one being there in line of sight to gather them all up together. So perfectly done there, finishing off all the trash except the officer, and one more shot even left for the officer. Okay, so perfect. Well done by Buff Nerf Rogue there, even though they did have the initial 5-player deaths on the first first pull. Not sure what exactly went wrong there. There's so many things that can actually go wrong with those kind of pulls, just because, you know, you have the silence come in, which slows you as well from some of those mobs, and then you have other random shots go off and damage going through. So there's definitely lots of things that can go wrong, especially if you have explosive as well. So well done by buff warrior Nerf rogues to get through this area, and now they're on Captain Valkyrie, and look how fast this boss is going down.
I mean, fortified boss with no trash to
yeah,
this boss is absolutely going to melt. You can see the burst damage coming out from Unholy DK. I mean, single target Unholy DK, we talk about it, you know, we talked about it this entire Summer Cup. Its single target is real now. It does a lot of burst single target damage. Single target is absolutely not the weak point for Unholy DK anymore, so you got to keep an eye on that. Like, I think they're going to be a premier class going forward, and if we don't get any major balance changes before BlizzCon, I think they'll be good going into BlizzCon too. We'll see a lot more of those double Unholy DK teams, especially from, I mean, we're already seeing it from teams like Abracadabra and Method E, or that are running it in trash heavy dungeons like Motherlode. Especially in fortified dungeons, I expect to see a lot of double Unholy DK.
I think though, like, I'm not completely sure about the single target damage. I mean, if they have army ready that Supreme just used, right, then they do this like huge single target burst. But I'm not sure how good they are without army. I think they can still, you know, do the same damage as most other melees, just not as crazy as it looks like with army. But it's weird to see that Supreme is actually committing the army for Valyrie when they don't want to commit the Bloodlust, right? Because usually you see the army in conjunction with the Bloodlust, just because army and Bloodlust are both at 10-minute cooldown. So interesting to see. Maybe they just wanted to have the cooldown split up, just so they don't, because, you know, the last boss is not actually that dangerous if you have fortified, and there's no affixes really making it more dangerous either. Explosive not going to be a problem, raging not going to be a problem. So maybe they just wanted to space out their cooldowns a little bit. Yeah,
I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Now, the thing I am sure of course, is that they don't need to kill this Void Emissary. I'm pretty sure you need 89% without the Void Emissary, and 90% if you don't want to kill it. So I'm pretty sure they're not going to have to deal with that. They only have to use the cannon to shoot the rest of these mobs here. And once they've done that, they'll be able to move on to the final boss. So they're sitting pretty right now in this dungeon, and it's going to be a little bit shorter than what their time trial run was. So, I mean, we no longer can think that they. I mean, they probably still could do a faster run, right? Like I mentioned earlier in the dungeon here, they probably could get a faster run, and if they have good RNG, they don't have any wipes. But yeah, no, definitely not anywhere near those like 13, 14-minute times we saw from the Western region last week. And I mean, a lot of that has to do with the explosive affix, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so as well. Explosive really making this so much harder. I think the Western region was even running double rogues when they had explosive, just because rogues have the immunity and have the cheat death, so they can go into the cannons. If they see lots of explosive, they go out, use their cloak, go back in, and then once the cloak is done, they still have cheat death to survive one more of those big explosive hits. But most other classes, you know, they have trouble to survive those kind of explosives in the cannons, and there's no other way for you to deal with them, because you don't have any range classes who could kill them for you, right? And you can't go close as a melee, because you will just get hit by the cannon shots or any other abilities from the trash. So those teams definitely have a hard time dealing with the explosive in Tol Dagor as a dungeon. And now we see buff warrior Nerf rogue actually getting the 100% trash. They are committing the Bloodlust to Overseer Korgus, and the boss is dropping really fast.
Hey, just saying, Supreme's still bursting very high without the army, even with the Bloodlust. Like, Unholy DK, I mean, it's very real, even without Army of the Dead, which is kind of scary. Which, if a team doesn't have any downsides to what their damage is, I mean, they're pretty ridiculous. And I think Unholy DK actually has a pretty significant amount of CC and mechanics to help in a dungeon on top of just doing damage as well. So, you know, you got the grip, you got the stun with asphyxia, you have a lot of stuff that you can do to help manipulate mobs in dungeons. So I think Unholy, like I mentioned, I think Unholy is just going to be a very premier class moving forward. Overseer Korgus now down to 50% for buff warrior Nerf rogue. And this is a boss where we always talk about how dangerous it is on Tyrannical. We're always looking out for those double explosive bursts from Overseer Korgus. But realistically, in this fortified affix, we're not going to see them go down to that unless the healer just AFKs for a solid 15 seconds.
Yeah, he has to AFK for quite a long time. You can see Loda doing a lot of damage as well, on top of keeping the whole group alive, just because of, you know, it not being too dangerous, especially on fortified, and not getting those devils as you just mentioned. You see Loda doing 24k DPS, so quite a lot on specifically a healer intensive fight. So unfortunately they did get a double right now. Loda did manage to keep himself alive though, because it's the most dangerous part of the doubles is keeping themselves alive, the Resolute themselves, just because the other people might not get a double even, just because it can be spaced out. It can be one on the tank, one on the monk, and then the next one can be on the DK and the rogue. Well, Lode is going to get every single one of them just because those bursting shots do prefer ranged targets. And as they're downing the boss, one more death, unfortunately, but once they down the boss, they're going to be 1-0 up against Black Mamba here.
Yep, Buff 4 going up 1-0 in the series, and it wasn't the cleanest run, but you know, one wipe, we'll take it. That's a pretty solid first showing for them, considering this is the first match they played in the tournament. If I'm mistaken, but I believe this is swapped. This was fortified the previous week, and this is not tyrannical.
Yeah.
So they actually probably could pull off that large pull that we saw them do with the Bloodlust on Kragmaw, because all the trash was fortified before. Now it's tyrannical. They can shoot through that with the Unholy DK more. But already, right off the bat, we're seeing completely different pulls from both teams. Black Mamba opt to skip just all the trash at the start of the dungeon, go straight to Elderly Axa, and pull the boss with Bloodlust. But something a little more interesting on the side of Buff 4 we got a Mistweaver mod.
We got 2 Mistweavers, actually. That's something we've seen from the Western region as well, just committing the Mistweaver for this specific dungeon, which just very good because of that Disease Dispel and just other utility in general, just because you're running the DK, so you don't need your healer to provide the battle rest anymore. You do have the DK who can rest instead of the healer, so really liking the Mistweaver switch up here. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see that insane huge pull on Buff 4 Nerf Rogue because they already committed their Bloodlust on the first pull. So both teams committing that Bloodlust early, but I like it. I'm not completely sure what Black Mamba wants to do because they didn't pull any trash, actually. They have 0% trash so far. Just immediately going to Elderly Axa and just committing a Bloodlust. I'm not completely sure if I like that. It is a tyrannical environment, so I don't think popping a Bloodlust on the boss is too bad. But there's just so many insane trash pulls you can do in this dungeon that I just feel like it would be better to use the Bloodlust for that.
So what I'm looking at with this comp right now is the one negative benefit, one of the problems with running Mistweaver instead of running the typical Resto Druid plus Windwalker that we see is you have one less knockback, right? And knockbacks are essential. They're crucial for Sanguine management in order to make sure mobs don't sit in Sanguine while they're casting. So they'll only have pretty much the one Ring of Peace from each Mistweaver monk, and that's it. Once the Ring of Peace is on cooldown, you don't have anything else to knock things out of Sanguine. You have the grip for one mob from the DK, and that's literally all you have. So the Sanguine management, the kiting, and the interrupts from the rogues and the DK and the warrior tank as well, the interrupts have to be on point, and the kiting has to be on point. So we'll have to keep an eye on Sanguine management when they get to Kragmaw's room here. Black Mamba has already gotten to the room, but of course they skipped all of the trash before Elderly Access, so we're going to have to see what they plan on pulling here, because they have to pull a lot more trash to make up for this missing percentage.
Yeah, this is a very interesting strategy coming out of Black Mamba, specifically because we've seen Buff 4 Nerf Rogue against Team D last cup around, where they did those insane Underrot strategies. Now, of course, it was fortified and not tyrannical back then, but usually teams just look at other team strategies that are at the top of their region and just copy most of theirs. That's what we've seen in the Western region as well. We see lots of teams just copy Method U, Method A strategies, and then just somehow like change them a little bit up for their liking. But Black Mamba is actually one of those teams that does come up with their own strategies all the time. They're just failing to execute them. But that's what I like about Black Mamba, though, is that they are innovative and they are coming up with those new strats.
Well, I mean, technically looking at the dungeon right now, they're ahead. They did their first 19% pull. Yeah. They didn't have to use Bloodlust for it, and they are pulling their next trash pack before Buff 4 Nerf Rogue has even started their next pull. So technically they're ahead. However, we do know Buff 4 Nerf Rogue loves to do a massive pull at the start here. They committed their Bloodlust to this last week because it's not fortified anymore. They can probably pull this off without it. Have to keep an eye on the damage on both Supreme and Tomboy here as they get those fixates from the Feral Bloodstormers. But you're about to see Supreme ascend here. He's going to do a lot of damage with his Unholy DK cooldowns on this AoE here.
Yeah, and you also got to, not only do you have to look at the damage coming out of the DKs, but also look at the HPS coming out of the Mistweaver monks as they go up to 200k HPS almost at the very start of those pulls. So Mistweaver is definitely also enabling these kind of huge pulls that they're doing at the start, because lots of those casts can actually be, they cannot be interrupted. So you have all of those creatures going through that do AoE damage to your team, and you have this so much AoE damage on the whole group, and the Mistweavers with their cooldowns just popping 200k HPS, making sure everyone gets healed up, and they can just tank the Bloodswarmers because of the HPS that the Mistweavers are pulling off. So that's not something a Resto could do, right? If you just have the Bloodswarmers, if you have 2 or 3 Bloodswarmers just fixating on your group and they're just tanking it without trying to kite or stunning them, that's something a Resto would definitely struggle to heal up. So definitely Mistweaver benefit as well in this dungeon.
Yeah, the thing I'm interested about is, we talked about this in the King's Rest yesterday, even though King's Rest wasn't raging, and I checked the raging like 4 times just to make sure it actually is raging before I talk about this time. Not running the Resto Druid means you don't have access to Soothe. I mean, Soothe is ridiculous. You saw how much damage that raging Feral Bloodstormer did to Supreme. The Mistweaver used the bubble on Supreme, and 1 melee from the Bloodstormer ate that entire shield. It's just a lot of damage coming out from the teams, and unfortunate because of the danger of that raging affix. You see on the side of Black Mamba, 2 deaths. They did have the Battle Rose come out from the DK onto the Monk, but look at this fixate. It's absolutely chunking the Rogue. If he gets meleeed again, he's probably going to die. He doesn't have cheat death available.
Yeah, they don't have a rest to get Moon back up, and the Rogues are so important in these kind of pulls just because the Rogues are the ones that are providing the single target utility, the single target interrupts, and that's why you see the double Rogue coming in still in these dungeons, just because of the lashes that constantly need to be interrupted. You need the Maggot frontal that needs to be interrupted, the Blood Swarmers need to be stunned so they don't kill people with their raging affix. So having Moon that here might cause some trouble, but there's only the Living Rots left, and Living Rots are the least dangerous mobs in this area because they don't need to be interrupted at all. They just need to be kited, and you need to dodge out of those green pools on the floor. So they should be able to finish this one off.
Yep, it was a little dangerous for them, but using the Battle Res, having the DK available for the Battle Res saved them there. If they were running the typical comp of no DK and Resto Druid, they would have been dead for sure. No healer means you wiped at that pull. But because of the problems Black Mamba has had, and honestly, the bigger pulls that Buff Nerf Rogue has pulled in this dungeon, dude, Buff Nerf Rogue looks so strong right now. This has got to be one of their better dungeons. They just cleared that entire room like a full 2 minutes faster than Black Mamba did. That was ridiculous how quickly they pulled that. And they've got 70% more trash percentage too, which of course is pretty much just what they pulled before Elderly Axa, but already they pulled Kragma before Black Mamba did. This is just very impressive for me.
Yeah, that's a very fast strategy that Buff Nerf Rogue is showing us here, and they still have 0 deaths, so perfectly 100% clean run by them so far. They do not have Bloodlust available for Kragma here, and we've talked about this boss being decently dangerous with that tyrannical affix. Now, Raging and Sanguine does not affect it, so there's one thing, it makes it a little bit easier, but it's still pretty dangerous just because of the Tantrum cast coming out. You can see the whole group just dropping low because of the Tantrum, and then if you don't soak all of those maggots on the floor, they will spawn adds out of it, and they will just leave a bleed behind on Ching. You can see one of the blood ticks actually spawning here, and the bleed applying to Ching. So there's definitely some things that can go wrong on this boss, and we've seen teams having to reset this boss in the past as well.
I mean, it's really important to mention that these teams are pretty much on a timer when it comes to Kragma. Every single time that energy bar below the HP, that orange bar fills up to 100, the boss will cast Tantrum. And that Tantrum on Tyrannical 18 does a lot of damage. You pretty much need to either use some healer cooldown, health potion, your personal cooldown to live through that. After 3 Tantrums, you're kind of dry, and you're in the point where you're like, okay, just use anything to live. You know, the Rogues will use Crimson Vial. You'll see, I don't even know what Supreme can use. They'll use pretty much anything they can to live to the Tantrum. You can see them all coming out of that Tantrum at like 30% HP. There's a lot of group damage going out. The next Tantrum is probably going to be the last one they get, and you're probably going to see them drop incredibly low during it, but you got to keep an eye. If they get that 4th Tantrum, we might see some deaths come out from Buff Nerf Rogue.
And this boss also has a little bit of RNG involved, so you gotta bless the RNG gods to be able to get this boss done a little bit easier and faster, because this boss has a ability Q time, and it's a little bit RNG if you get a charge first or an indigestion first, which is the frontal tank cast. If you do get a charge first after the Tantrum, then he will cast 2 charges and 1 indigestion. If you get indigestion first after the Tantrum, you will only get 1 charge, so it will be a little bit more time in between Tantrums if you get a charge first.
It's important to mention why that's important, right? The charges will spawn those blood maggots like in a larger radius where you'll have to actually spread out and stomp on top of them, whereas the frontal, the indigestion, spawns them all in a tiny little cone in front of the boss. So the indigestion is definitely the easier mechanic to deal with in terms of DPS on the boss, and it looks like they're going to get the 4th Tantrum. This might be a little sketchy from them.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. still has a decent amount of mana left, so they might be alright to heal up. We also see the cloaks ready for the rogues, so maybe that will help as well. We see Ching actually... they're
going to beat it.
They're fine. Okay, they're not going to get the last Tantrum, so they're fine. On Black Mamba side, on the other hand, I think they're also going to down it before the last Tantrum, so they both should be fine. As Buff Nerf Rogue moves on, they already killed this Guardian pack here, the Skeleton pack. They're still shrouding past the... What's the name again? The macaroni.
Oh yeah, the Danger Noodle.
The Danger Noodle, that one.
The menacing macaroni. There's a lot of words for it. If Slim Terry could tell them to you, but
one of those.
I don't have the cheat sheet written down in front of me, so I can't tell you all of them. He's probably livid in the back right now that we don't know all of them off the top of our heads. Yeah, it looks like they just opt to completely skip it, which is interesting because it's not really that dangerous of a mob. It only requires some single target focus from interrupts as well. So interesting to see them skip that. Maybe they just don't want to deal with it because it's fixed in where it stands. You can't move it at all, and they want to be able to kite around and pull extra mobs on top of each other. So that makes a little bit of sense that they would skip that. But it's just a little bit of difference in mobs pulled.
Yeah, one more thing is that Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue actually is playing Horde, so they do have the Blood Elf racial available to them, which does dispel magic effects of enemy mobs. That's why you can see them on cooldown right now for most of them, because they were dispelling the shields off of those guardians. Now Black Mamba on the other hand, they're playing Night Elf, so they're playing Alliance. They're not making use of the human racial, which is something we've seen from the western region before. They would be playing humans just so they can get out of this lasher stun in case it goes through on them. They would have it on monks, for example, on the Windwalker monks, so they could get out of the stun, and then the monks could dispel the diseases on other people. But Black Mamba not one of the... we see a red check.
Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
We're already on the boss. Are you guys ready?
Supreme is not ready.
Yo, hit ready. Please hit ready. Please stay psych. Okay, yeah, boss pulled. And we saw the interesting mechanic that we've seen from a lot of teams here, where the monk used the Ring of Peace to split the Emissary of the Tides away from the Defilers, because they're not social, right? If you pull the Emissary while it's not in range of the blood of the Defilers, they don't all pull, only the Emissary pulls. So they actually just pull the Emissary, kill it off on its own, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them now, once that Emissary is dead, to pull the Defilers in, and so they can now deal with interrupts and get extra cleave for both the rogues and the DK on top of the boss, but they haven't done it yet. Maybe they're waiting for cooldowns, maybe they're waiting for flurry cooldown. I'm interested to see whether they're going to do that. We've seen a lot of teams pull these Defilers into the boss afterwards. Yeah,
they're actually pulling it right now, so they heard you. You can see them being aggroed on Ching right now. They're going to be a big... Oh, Tom actually dropping very low, proccing his cheat death here. They're going to be decently careful with the next... with the next upheaval, but I believe the Revival might be ready for Loda, so Revival actually a pretty nice cooldown here for this specific boss, just because not only does it do a huge burst of healing to everybody, it also removes all of the diseases on the whole group, so you can just basically save the mash. You just don't have to get rid of them if you don't want to. You can just have the rogue save their cloak in theory if you have the Revival ready.
Yep, and you see it come out right there. Just use the Revival to pop 3 to make sure 3 people got dispelled there. So a little safe from them. The rogues have their cloak, but like you mentioned, just the Revival to save himself, Supreme, and the tank as well. Just safety from them. Unfortunately, on the side of Black Mamba, they had a lot of problems on that pull. They committed their lust to it. Their tank went down almost instantly at the start of the pull. They had to use their one and only battle res on him, and then afterwards, just more problems for them. They ended up full wiping with Spore Color Zancha. So Black Mamba is going to have some problems moving forward. They'll have to skip all this trash, but we see a lot of deaths coming out just on the skip here. This is really unfortunate from them.
This is just the story of Black Mamba, really, right? Because they were playing pretty decently up until this point. I mean, they were behind to Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, but they didn't have a bad run up until this. And now they just have this huge team wipe again. And this is what happens to them all the time. I'm not really sure what exactly is causing these kind of problems that they're having. Maybe it's really just practice time. Maybe they just, need to practice more. Either way, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue not having any of those kind of problems at all. They have 0 deaths, so still 100% clean run by them. They do have their bloodlust available, so we'll see what they're going to commit the bloodlust to later on. Either it will be a trash pull or a boss. Either way, it's tyrannical this time around, so it will be okay to save it for the last boss for them as well. I
mean, even on Fortified, we see most teams saving their second bloodlust for the Endbound Abomination. Yeah. So I would be very surprised to see them not use it there. I mean, it made sense. In previous weeks, we've talked about where teams are using their bloodlust in this dungeon because it was that Fortified affix and of how dangerous the trash is on Fortified. Just because the trash has more HP and does more damage, it makes sense to use your bloodlust on large trash pulls. And I mean, even this dungeon, Buff Warrior Nerf War used their bloodlust on the first trash pull in the dungeon. They did a massive trash pull, 19% trash with their bloodlust, and they just used it to enable that pull. You don't really need it to get through Elderly Axa, which makes sense because you do have the Prot Warrior Spell Reflect, and you have a lot of control with the DK able to grip the vision that spawns on that boss as well, so you can cleave them on top of each other, get interrupts very easily. So it makes sense to not have to use bloodlust on that boss. It would only really make sense for them to not use bloodlust on Abomination if they actually plan on doing all 17% of the remaining trash at the same time, but based off what trash is left in the dungeon, I don't really see them doing that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, they're actually displaying some real skill here in this dungeon in general, just because I almost never even had to mention Sanguine so far because none of the mobs really healed. I've never seen any of the mobs heal for them, at least not significantly. So they're definitely dealing with the affixes super well. Raging also hasn't really been a problem at all for them. And we talked about the affixes being very dangerous in this dungeon specifically, just because the trash is super dangerous in Underrot. But Bafor and Nerf Rogue just not seeming, it seems so easy as they just ran through the dungeon and not having a care in their world. But this is definitely very dangerous and super risky, those kind of pulls that they're pulling off here. You can see the Defiler being pulled on top of the Guardians as they all go into Raging, and it seems like they're just committing their CC very well as well. They're just waiting with their AoE stuns once they go into Raging, and also just, you know, want to make sure that Ching stays alive. They don't hit Ching at the very same time once they are reaching this Raging area.
These guys look so good in this dungeon, and also, and they're also playing safe, right? They noticed that they were still in combat with the Emissary there, so even though they committed the Ring of Peace to skip the large ad there, they just decided, you know what, we're ahead, we're going to play it safe, we're just going to kill off the Emissary. And I'm pretty sure once they kill this Emissary, they already have more than enough trash to finish the dungeon, right? They can kill those 2 ads, blocking the way at the end of the dungeon, those 2 Corruptors at the end of the dungeon will give them the rest of the mob count they need. But, you know, playing it safe, knowing that they were still in combat with an Emissary, which would social pull other things close to it if they happen to run right by any of the mobs. So playing it very safe. This Emissary of the Tides here is a little interesting, so you can't use your knockbacks on any of the frontals from the Corruptor, so that's the only thing I'd look out for here. But, you know, dodging frontals, the way they played this dungeon so far, it'd be very weird if they ended up having deaths to just this small pull, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't believe so either. There's some teams who had trouble with those mobs. Actually, in the past, we've seen people get one-shot because if you get hit by any of their abilities, if you get hit by the tentacles, they can easily one-shot you. Or you can also get one-shot by the Madding and Gaze, which is the frontal cast that if you somehow survive it, then you also get feared on top of just getting a huge initial damage burst from it as well. But it seems like Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue is playing it pretty well. They are moving around the tentacles perfectly. And yeah, once they're down, they actually are on 100% trash. And yes, they were saving their Bloodlust all the way for the last boss, and there it is, 100% trash. They're just gonna have to wait for their RP, and then they're gonna be able to attack the last boss.
Black Mamba has not had a good time getting back to Sport Color Zancha on their side. They have had 9 more deaths.
And they're even Alliance too.
Right? Yeah, they also have Shadow Meld available, so this is just not looking good for them, unfortunately. Just, once again, like you mentioned, this is... I think we've more often in the past couple of weekends seen more of the not clean side of Black Mamba. We want to see more of the clean side, obviously. We want to see them play well, but, you know, if almost every single one of your dungeons this weekend has been this way, you kind of have to wonder what's going on with them. Is it nerves at that point, or is that just the way this team is going to be playing from now on?
I mean, we really also gonna have to talk about this whole scaling thing that also was a problem for the Western region, right? The Western region, in theory, is the region that doesn't have a lot of wipes. They have those clean runs with not many deaths, and then usually the Eastern region has more problems. But this time around, with the increase to level 18, both the Western and the Eastern region had huge problems in dungeons. They had those huge wipes coming in, were more than 20 deaths in each run, and it seems like, you know, it seems like a fiesta, and people are making fun of it. Oh, is this just my weekly 10 or whatever? But plus 18s are actually very dangerous for these kind of teams, just because there's a problem with scaling going on, because their damage scales really high, but their HP didn't scale as well as their damage did. So it seems like they're doing insane amounts of damage for the level, but they don't have the HPs to survive basically anything. So if they die, it's almost always going to be a one-shot. So it's really hard to recover for them. If they do those huge pulls, which they have to be competing in the MDI, then if you get hit by any little small ability just because your HP didn't scale as well as your damage, you're just gonna die.
Yeah, I think it was Lighty from Method a very in-depth post about that, where he actually put like specific numbers to it. It's like, if you look at our damage from the spring season of MDI, we're doing about 80 to 90% more damage per person, but our HP scaling only went up by about 40 to 50%. So like you mentioned, when the pulls are clean, they look like they're perfect, but if any one thing goes wrong, instead of having a person drop to 20-30%, they just get one shot and you have to commit your battle res, and that's, you know, that doesn't really feel too good, but that just kind of places a lot more emphasis on making sure your execution is perfect rather than trying to go at a blazing speed throughout the dungeon. However, that being said, Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue, boss is at 33%, the final energy bar is about to fill up, which means we're going to get those final 2 blood visages spawning, and another, I mean, outside of the one small wipe in Tol Dagor, this is an incredibly clean run in Underrot, and honestly, this is a blazing fast time for Tyrannical Underrot. I believe we had 16 to 17 minute times for Fortified Underrot from the Western team, so a sub-19 run on Tyrannical, I think, is very, very fast from Buff Warrior Nerf Rogue.
It's just insanely fast, to be honest.
Very impressive showing here by Buff meaning there is more trash present in the dungeon. But right off the bat, Team 430, we do know, likes to do this pull here with the Emissary and pop their Bloodlust. Indeed, they follow suit on that, as Pixel is doing a more traditional or more common strategy of getting involved in the action right up in Sky Captain Craig's room.
Yeah, let's see if Pixel want to commit their Bloodlust for this pretty huge pull that they're doing. We see the army being popped as well by mid, which is actually kind of weird because we see usually DKs are holding onto the army for a single target rather than AoE because it's not as effective. But Pixel and their DK committing their Bloodlust for this single target pull, for this AoE pull, sorry. The disc was actually dropping really low but did manage to recover. Pain Sap is out as well as Team 430 are getting closer and closer to finishing off their first pull.
Yeah, LO dipping quite low here too as Pixel starts to head off and finish some of the trash, but we still have quite a bit up in the higher areas of 30 to 50% right now, and some of these enforcers absolutely truck, but it seems that the immediate main danger is over right now as Komi gets tossed yet again. Team 430 has cleaned up their pull on the side with the Void Emissary there. Of course, we're in a Void-heavy dungeon as far as the Beguiling Affix. Komi, unfortunately, following, I guess, the danger was not over on the side of no Pixel. They do have their Battle Res available from mid, who unfortunately sacrificed himself in order to do so. All the threat is all over the place right now. We can already see Fame, the Havoc Demon Hunter, running around in circles, making sure he allows Komi time to pick up the threat from these mobs. The Enforcer, unfortunately, still running after Fame right now as Onezor starts to head off to the side.
Yeah, so mid unfortunately cannot release it. He does not have the Shadow Melt available, which is weird because they were actually shrouding up to this point. So maybe he wasn't completing the shroud and had to commit the Shadow Melt to de-aggro the mobs. So he does not have the Shadow Melt available anymore. So he just has to wait until they're out of combat so he can get a rest up. Unfortunately, once they're actually proccing his staff as well because he did go out of mana. Now on the other side on Team 430, they have to pull this one pack to spawn the boss because they were doing this first pull without the Enforcer pack here. So once they down this Enforcer, they will have the boss spawn and then they will engage it as well if they didn't change up their strategy from last time around.
So part of the reason mid doesn't have his Shadow Meld is because there's that Void Emissary right on the stairs at the beginning of the dungeon. So the only way to drop combat with it if you're mass stealthing past is to have to Shadow Meld. So he does not have that available. It's back up now, so he could actually technically release. I just don't even know if he'd get through it alive. It is fortified in his teaming, so there's lots there. But they do manage to kill off the rest of the trash as Onezor gets the res on mid. Sky Captain Craig is ready to be pulled here for Team Pixel as Team 430 has already started on Sky Captain Craig. 0 deaths on the board for them, 21% trash, and is at 80%, about to hit that transition phase at 75, where Sky Captain Craig will, of course, dismount the guano-producing parrot, and they'll be ready to pull it to the side and make sure that, that they don't reset the boss. I'm not sure if it was them yesterday that had the reset on the boss, but there was one, so you got to be really careful where the parrot dive comes in. It will knock the tank out of the arena, and if the boss follows the tank, which is likely the case, then we're going to have a reset on our hands.
It was actually one last chance that had the boss reset. They were playing against Team 430. Team 430 still ended up losing the dungeon though against one last chance. So Team 430 were playing Freehold yesterday already, but they were just too slow. They didn't end up having any huge mistakes or any huge wipes. Their strategy just seemed a lot slower compared to one last chance one. But Pixel also one of those teams, you know, that don't have those insane strategies where they pull half the dungeon together. So maybe this time around Team 430's strategy is going to be faster than Pixel ones. Maybe it's going to pay off. Or they even had time. They even had one day to prepare a better strategy, a faster one if they wanted to.
I'm just, you know, I guess it applies to both sides, but especially in the melee area for Pixel, I'm really worried about the survivability of the DK and the fact that he's the only one who can res on the side of Pixel. There's just a lot of that rando damage going on in the trash leading up to, well, really post Sky Captain Craig. You just have the blind rages, a lot of the Shattering Earth going out, so it's very easy for a melee to just kind of keel over and fall. Conversely, of course, the healer could just get gripped in by one of the harpooners and get killed, so both teams only having access to that one battle res. Actually, something that no Pixel doesn't even have available right now for another 6 minutes, so no point even talking too much about that. Sky Captain Craig hits 3% here for Team 430, about to go down. Cinderella quite low, having a lot of struggle healing through that 4 stack of Grievous on the side of Team 430, but finally manages to top him off as they head over to the bridge. And, you know, Pixel actually really not that far behind. They're at 5% right now. Sky Captain Craig, Nagura, pretty good single target coming out of them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kiki actually was holding on to the Tree of Life, not committing it onto the boss here, even though the whole team seemed to be dropping very low. He didn't manage to heal away those Grievous stacks on anybody. So that must mean that he really wants this Tree of Life for some bigger pull that they're planning on doing here in this area, because it really seems like a situation where you just want to pop your tree and heal everyone up. But if they planned on doing a pull where they need the Tree of Life, then he just needs to hold on to it. So good on him, but keeping everyone alive without committing the cooldown. Unfortunately, Inspiration actually goes down to one of those Void Touch Emissaries casts, and the trash on top of it as well.
Yeah, quite dangerous there, and unfortunately the DK follows suit. Sorry, the Fury Warrior follows suit. They're not playing with the DK. Kiki dipping quite low as well. We'll have to line of sight the next cast, and I appreciate it. They're on the side of Pixel. They actually were all using the Alliance Chopper mount, and they just kind of, there was like a biker gang going across the bridge. So nice to be there from our observers earlier, in case you missed it. But Team 430 here with their own struggles as they do manage to finally kill the Void Emissary. They did have to commit the battle res, as mentioned by Nagura there, because Inspiration did fall. That kind of cast for a Void, especially on something like a Warrior, sometimes it catches you off guard. Of course, one cast won't kill you, but when you have these heavy mobs, especially an Oarsman in there, which are quite dangerous for tanks, they hit pretty hard, hitting you, and then all of a sudden you dip from a couple of melees, and then the hit comes from the Void Emissary. It's enough to finish you off if you're not paying attention. So Inspiration got caught there with his tail between his legs. Fortunately, they did have the battle res, as no Pixel is getting started on that first Vermin Trapper, actually finishing that first Vermin Trapper and starting to carve some of the way to the Council of Captains encounter.
And unfortunately, one of them who released, they came back through the bridge, but there was this one Enforcer that they skipped earlier, and this time around they didn't have Shadow Meld ready, so they have to finish off this Enforcer that they didn't really plan on finishing off, but maybe there's some trash they can skip later, so maybe it will pay off later on. Either way, Team 430 now finally done with this trash pull, out of battle rests for both teams, and Pixel, to be honest, I mean, yeah, they're 7% behind in trash, but they're not doing so bad at all. It's all going to be about those pulls that they do later on and how efficient they're going to be, especially in the Ring of Booty. Like, how many trash packs are they actually going to pull on top of Ludwig or on top of Trothak?
Yeah, a lot of the efficiency really does come to that Ring of Slooty. Pixel here 22%, but part of the issue or benefit to them is we saw Team 430 how they performed this dungeon last night. I'm not sure how heavily they're going to change their routing. We'll see once they get to that Ring of Booty, but they moved so slowly that, as you mentioned earlier, they actually ended up losing the match, even though they had a huge advantage because of the reset from one last chance going in yesterday. So something that that Pixel can take advantage of as they get started on the Council of Captains before Team 430 here. They, of course, are inferior in trash percentage, but as you mentioned, it's something that they can easily recover with efficiency later on.
Yeah, and we see Pixel actually engaging the boss here. Now, this time around, we do not have Eudora active, so definitely a little bit easier, because having Eudora active on a Grievous affix is so dangerous because the shots do so much damage, and then on top of that, you also have to heal the Grievous away. So this time, only having Raoul and Jolly, which usually not that dangerous. I mean, there's definitely things that can go wrong. Comey actually dropping very low there. Now, there's a bruise on the floor, so if the bosses, actually get hit by brews like the crit or the haste brew, then it can actually cause a lot of trouble for the tank, as we just saw there.
Yeah, and part of the issue as well is he actually got caught in the whirlwind kind of charge, essentially, from Captain Jolly, and what that does is it puts a very heavy bleed on you. So he got caught in that, and a couple of melees with probably the buffs, like you mentioned, actually almost kind of destroyed him there. Pain suppression was used and committed by One'Zor there. Probably helped save his life with that 40% DR right now, as more brews are tossed here by the ever so happy bartender behind the bar there for Team 430. 40% on trash, just about 40% as they finish up a really substantial pull, and they get ready soon to go to the Council of Captains. Something that Pixel has actually done quite well here. We've killed Captain Ruel off, killed Captain Jolly off, excuse me. Only Captain Ruel remains, and after this, we'll have to see exactly, hopefully for them, how efficiently they deal with the remaining trash to catch up.
Yeah, one more thing to note about Team 430, they actually have Cinderella, their rogue, go off to the Ring of Booty to start the NPC event, which most teams in the past, we saw the healers run off and stealth over there to get the NPC started. And Cinderella actually also not managing properly, having a death go through, so didn't somehow aggro them up, not completely sure what happened there, but he did go down, so he will have to stealth back to the group. But Team 430, I mean, I guess it makes sense that they're having the rogue go up because of Grievous. So the team, it's going to be hard to pull a trash pack without having the healer with your group if you have the Grievous affix.
All right, you are. The rogue goes off. Cinderella, unfortunately, does not make it back before midnight and incurs the death there. 3 deaths on the board right now for Team 430 as Pixel sits at 2 and has done a double pull. Actually, I think it was a triple pack pull. So, no, it was a double. So a pretty significant pull nonetheless, especially in this fortified teaming environment for Pixel. And they're handling it quite well right now. One Fear coming coming out of Onezor, unfortunately, but he does fall. We mentioned just how dangerous some of these mobs are and the amount of cleave and random damage they could do to the party members if they're not handled properly. So Onezor, his health just disappeared. He basically got globaled there, but does manage to come back up as one of the battle reses for both teams actually is about to reset at 1 charge right now. 40% for Pixel and 52% trash for Team 430, who is now working on the Council of Captains.
Yeah, thankfully they did down the boss here to get the respawn there, because once Onezor is down, there's actually no rest for them to get them back up, because they don't have any out of combat rest, right? So definitely good that they did finish off the boss to have the respawn there. Now Team 430 did also start the combat. They're not pulling any trash on top of it yet. They also have the Bloodlust available, actually, Team 430, but don't seem to be committing it yet. Maybe they want to have it on the boss later on. Pixel as well having their Bloodlust ready.
Yeah, Pixel here just doing, you know, kind of a modest pull. We usually see this pack pulled over by, like, when they're waiting for a Ludwig or something like that to spawn, the teams go up, but they're actually combining it with a second pack on the side, and there's usually a Void Emissary at the side there, so I'm not sure exactly what they did with that. Maybe we can get a better view from our observers later, because this is one of the packs guarding the bridge with that Void Emissary that you will have to pass on the way to Harlan Suite. So a bit of interesting and certainly different pathing and routing that we're seeing come from Pixel compared to some other teams, but Team 430 here still working away at this boss. Is an average of 25% remains between the two bosses, Captain Jolly and Captain Raoul. Mostly flawless victory coming in here for them. Their deaths were outside of the bosses. Pixel finishes the rest of the trash here and will likely be going over to start their ring. Now, I'm not sure, Nagura, on the side of Pixel, I didn't see, did anybody pre-start the event for Lightning?
I didn't see it.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see.
we will see.
Unless we
no,
close
they did
our
not.
eyes.
There we go. So Ella just now stealthed over, started the event. So it will take quite a while until the pick spawns and until they can continue and have Ludwig spawn. Team 430, on the other hand, they already did start the event earlier, so they will be starting the event a lot faster. Now, I remember last time around, their Fury Warrior was actually doing a lot of damage on the boss that they just downed. This time around, not so much. Not sure if the last time it was just luck or he got a lot of bruise on top of him, a lot of friendly bruise. Either way, this time around not doing as much damage as the last time, as they are clicking on that pig. It was the Diablo player that got the pig.
You know, it is possible that the Fury Warrior last time around had a lot more 5 buffs. So this time, I just don't think it worked out in his favor. He is, of course, a rogue in training. He's not fully achieved his yellow color yet. And you're absolutely right. I have no phone. Suddenly named the Diablo player by you. Has grabbed the trash here. 54% for Team 430 as they shoot through the bridge trash or side bridge trash that Pixel is still doing here. But issue here for the no phone player as he goes down on Team 430. They commit their battle res to that. That's a bit of a question mark for me because, I mean, okay, it is very dangerous trash, but they did just also kill a Council of Captains. It's not a very far run, especially for something like a DH that could probably just double Fell Rush over and get back into action quickly, but they didn't want to take the chance. They used the battle res and not going to have that for 7.5 minutes now as Pixel has grabbed the piggy and are getting ready to start on some extra trash while Ludwig von Schnitzel spawns.
So we have the Demon Hunt actually go down one more time. Very unfortunate for Team 430, but they are about to finish off this trash pack, so they should get him back up soon. You see the arrest actually going through from Kiki instead of having him released. Very interesting there as well, because as Lud mentioned, the spawn is very close. Either way, Pixel are fighting fighting on a trash mob here, having the Emissary of Tides as well, and they're pulling Ludwig on top. Oh, okay, so there's the Bloodlust that they're committing, which is very interesting to commit the Bloodlust on Ludwig, and Team 430 actually doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that crazy to see right now because we are in a fortified environment, and as you know, you always let us know, as we all know really at this point, Ludwig scales with fortified. He's a mini boss and he just has so much health and actually hits quite hard on tanks. Now, Warriors well equipped to deal with dual wielding damage, so the mob swings a lot quicker here on the side of Ludwig. Very good at dealing with that physical blockable damage, so not too much concern for them, but the Fury Warrior going down here for Team 430, and they had used their battle res earlier on I Have No Phone on the DH, so they can't get him up, and he's not really releasing either, but I don't think he can because, oh no, actually he could because he's not in combat, so he won't get stuff thrown on him, but he just stays dead on the floor as they hit 69% trash, and they still have about 40% left on Ludwig, which is a huge amount of health. Pixel sitting at 66% trash, 3 deaths on the board versus Team 436, and is in a bit slightly better shape on Ludwig. Pixel is actually looking in the superior position right now, Nagura.
Yeah, I'm actually super surprised that Pixel is doing so well because
Rude.
we talked about, well, their higher SKUs are 15 in time, right? And this is an 18. It's like, that's 3 levels higher if my math checks out. Let me use my fingers to count.
We'll have to check backstage for that.
Either way, Pixel is about to down Ludwig here. They have 3 deaths, so there's a 15-second time advantage that they have over Team 430. And Team 430 just now downing Ludwig as well. There's a small trash percentage difference in favor of Team 430, but not a lot to overcome at all for Pixel.
No problem for them. They grabbed some of the neutral mobs on the side right now, and they're just cleaning it up as Trothak sparkingly approaches the arena in the back there. Now, finally get the res here on the Fury Ware for Team 430. That does the same thing. They go up and they pull the, I don't know if Brian Scales are even active here, but nonetheless, they pull the one pack overhanging the ledge that is close to the patrol. I'm not sure. Yeah, there is the patrol indeed. So they had to get favorable timing for the patrol to come in, and they're doing a double pack pull on the side of Team 430. That's likely going to get them, well, it is teaming, so it'll probably get them in the high 70s, low 80s%. And we've seen most teams, at least yesterday, approach Harlan with about 84% trash, somewhere in that range. And then they finish the rest of it off with Harlan's cannonball during the boss encounter. Pixel wasting no time and sitting at that 73% trash with just a bit on top of Trothak. We've seen Army committed here from mid as they chew through the boss.
Yeah, so we'll see how the Disc Priest actually handles this boss, because this boss is pretty taxing on the healer, just because you have the Grievous affix, meaning you have to heal the whole group while also having to kite the sharks into those pools on the floor, as you can see right now. So lots of things to do for a healer, and Residures in general, they're pretty good at casting their rejuice and their hots while running, so not the biggest problem for them. But Disc Priest, they do have to cast quite a bit, so interesting to, especially if they want to heal away the Grievous stacks, right? So we'll see how Onzer handles this boss. On the other hand, Team 430 now also engaging Trothak.
They do have that penance on the run as well that they can channel while moving, and I think that has, I can't remember for sure, I mean this is like beta days of BFA, but I think it's a 9-second cooldown, something like that. I'm sure Jackie will jump at the opportunity to correct me later, but it is pretty low cooldown, so it's something that he can frequent while kiting that shark, getting enough space between them. So Trothak here at 55% right now for Pixel, who sits at 76% trash, just slightly behind Team 430 is at 83% trash, but 76 on Trothak. So teams are actually quite close together, so we're going to have to start looking at the smaller details, and that comes down to the 3 deaths right now between the teams. Team 430 has 6 versus Pixel's 3, so they're going to have to overcome the dungeon by an extra 15 seconds from this point on in order to try and beat Pixel. And I wouldn't be shocked if, well, to be fair, I don't know if there's any other trash, but Pixel might combine some more trash with Trothak. Trothak is certainly a very long, arduous boss for the teams, and for Melee, it's really not that dangerous if you don't stick your neck into the whirlwind, so why not combine some trash on top of it?
Yeah, one interesting thing I just noticed as well is that the Rogue is playing Asa on Pixel's side, so not actually the Outlaw spec that we usually see out of those Rogues. So maybe some interesting differences in single target damage as well later on, comparing those 2 Rogues, unless Cinderella gets a bunch of 5 buffs. And the Fury Warrior damage actually coming out of Team 430, again topping those damage meters on Trothak. Now, I mean, the last percentage that they need, both of those teams, they're really able to get them while fighting the last boss. But as far as I'm aware, Team 430 the last time around only pulled 1 pack on top of the boss, and both of those teams do not have the Bloodlust available. And generally speaking, if teams do want to pull a lot of the trash on top of Harlan Suite, then they want to commit their Bloodlust as well, just because it's so dangerous. So maybe both of those teams actually not wanting to do that. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see indeed. Team Pixel is 76. I mean, they need more. Like 80, mid-80s, low 80s% trash, I think, is the bare minimum, especially with teaming that they need to combine on top of Harlan. But they've already killed most of the trash around the area, including the bridge pack. And there is the Void Emissary I was talking about earlier. So they actually melded her, and it looks like they're going to be doing the same thing again right now. In fact, they just might leave her in combat. It doesn't matter if she's in combat until they get all the way up to Harlan's room. I love seeing this multi-alliance chopper gang coming out of NoPixel. I don't know, this is really fun to me to see. But they do indeed use the Shadow Meld. Actually, the Rogue vanished. Everybody else stayed in combat. He vanished, popped Shroud for the group, and they head upstairs, and now everybody's going to pop Shadow Meld. It's actually a pretty neat skip from them. We usually see 1 or 2 people die on the way. Okay, I spoke too soon. Make that 3 people. So, bit of a sloppy pull. Oarsman gets its cast off as well. Mid falls down. Fortunately, survives the fall, and Onzer gets out of combat, but it looks like they're not done just yet as he runs in and finishes mid off. Onzer safely Shadow Melded on the side and is now casting Master Resurrection to get his teammates up. So I spoke a bit early there.
Yeah, that's actually very unfortunate for Pixel here because they did have the advantage in the death difference, right? But now, because of those 4 deaths, they're actually 5 seconds behind. Very unfortunate for Pixel, as Team 430 is actually choosing to finish off the Void Emissary and just dealing with the trash. Actually, Inspiration going down as well, so evening up the deaths.
Yeah, they're evening up the deaths, and they'll have +1 on top of that because I believe I Have No Phone, and yep, he goes down too. So they just had no option to get them across because I Have No Phone did not have Shadow Meld. Neither of them had Shadow Meld available, so they just chose to sacrifice themselves while the others went up. So once again, the death difference is in the favor of Pixel, but only by 1 this time instead of 3, so that's an extra 5 seconds they'll have. His Harlan Suite has been pulled here. No Bloodlust committing on top of the trash pack, as you see in the background there, just rotated through. Usually we see teams pop Bloodlust, grab that trash pack, combine it with Harlan Suite, and try to nuke everything together. But since they don't have access to that powerful group CD, they're just going to play it a bit cool here.
Yeah, Team 430 at this point are pretty far ahead in trash. They're 92%, as Pixel is sitting on 76% still. I wonder what Pixel wants to do with all of the trash that they're still missing. Either they want to pull it at the very end of Harlan Suite, making use of the friendly fire damage, or they just want to play it really safe, finish off Harlan Suite first, and then deal with all of the trash. Either way, there's still a lot of the trash they need to make up, while Team 430, they don't have much at all. They only have 8%, which might just be the one pack that we see in this boss area that teams usually pull with Bloodlust, on top of 1 Ravager pack that should be adding up to 100%.
Should be indeed, as Harlan hits 71%, 70% out to Team 430, 10% more, and they'll hit the second phase where the Cannonball Barrage will target every non-tank in the group. So 4 barrages going out, plus those slicing winds will have a 360 degree as opposed to 120 degree, which is 360 divided by 3, Nagura. So yeah, just to make sure we're on the same page, Harlan Suite here, 50% on Pixel, already in that second phase, but they gotta get a move on with the trash. At this point, I'm just thinking maybe they're going to kill the boss and then do the trash, but just as I say that, I think we saw a grip going in on one of the Enforcers as they get some more of that percentage chiseled through. Comey just having so much struggle right now. Rallying Cry is popped here for Pixel, but he just can't get healed through that 4 Grievous stack. You know, I'm sure Jackal will chime in later, but once a Disc Priest starts falling behind on Grievous, it's very difficult for them to catch up as far as I know.
Yeah, you can see the whole group just, sitting on those 4 stacks. So once they're definitely struggling to keep the group alive, but once the boss reaches 30% HP, they should be able to get him down pretty quickly. Team 430, on the other hand, reached their 100% trash at this point. So once they finish up Harlan Suite, they're going to be done. While Pixel still has to do 15% trash. Very unfortunate for them. It was looking really good for Pixel throughout this whole dungeon, but now we're still having to do 15% trash. I very highly doubt that they can do it over Team 430 just finishing off Harlan Suite.
No, there's no way, and there's still people in 4 stacks of Grievous. One's where himself's there, Elo's there. He's just having so much struggle. His mana's at 30% now. No staff proc to save the day either, as Harlan Suite falls to 20% here for Team 430. They back into the corner. Kiki staying safely out of the reach if any of those slicing wins or accidentally getting clipped by anything. Huge trash pull here for Pixel right now. Comey going down immediately. That was a very wishful thinking pull. That is a lot of damage going in without Bloodlust on top of it. That's going to be a full team wipe for Pixel, and that's all they need. Triple A and Black Mamba at the end of the dungeon. So hopefully these teams learn from those lessons and manage to clean it up. But in a dungeon with so many smallies, for lack of a better term, just insignificant low health mobs present in the dungeon, Necrotic gets to be quite out of hand quite quickly, Nagura.
Yeah, most definitely. Especially if you do those kind of snapping pulls that we see most of those teams do, because all of the mobs just immediately start hitting the tank. You can see Comey just having 45 or
66.
Oh, 66. Sorry, I need better glasses apparently. Mine aren't big enough. Either way, Comey going down, unfortunately not being able to get healed through all of those necrotic stacks. Didn't even seem to start kiting either. So either way, they did get him back up. Did have to commit the battle rest though, so they're not going to have that available to them. Well, Team 430 also struggling.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to call this one out here. The pull, he's not only did he start kiting, they used a battle res when he could have just released from the dungeon and come in at the very beginning. And then on top of it all, he never even used his shield wall when he had 66 stacks in necrotic. I mean, I don't know about that one. I think he kind of deserved that death there. His inspiration did run off and reset here. He has 1 regrowth stack on him, 1 rejuve stack on him, excuse me, as Wild Growth goes out from Kiki right now, trying to heal up the rest of the group. That took a bit of splash damage as well. So 1 death on either side, but no Pixel. Pixel. I keep saying no Pixel because of the GTA 5 RP, but Pixel has a no battle res available for the 8 minutes or so, which could be pretty significant with some of the trash coming up, including Acquisier. And I mean, we know, and even some teams now don't do the checkpoint with the Ritualist after the second boss. So if you have a death at any point, they're gonna have to run back, and likely there's gonna be some skips. So I'm already kind of worried for Pixel.
I actually just want both of the teams to get all of the checkpoints and clear all the way so they don't have to do anything bad if they have a team wipe. Because let's be honest here, those teams, they're not the cleanest teams from the Eastern region that we've seen so far. So I personally would like them to play it pretty safe, and if anyone goes down, they could just release and walk all the way back, because that can just easily happen, especially if you have those affixes. If you have Necrotic and you have Tyrannical in his dungeon, just anything can really happen. You see Team 430 now on 10% trash. They did finish off one more of these caster packs, and those pulls are actually super dangerous just because of all of the attendants that you pull on top of each other, and the Spiritualists who constantly need to interrupt it if they cast their heal, and then you have the Water Blast, which just, you know, an insane amount of damage, especially if you have a lot of necrotic stacks and you're unhealable, basically.
Yeah, speaking of Comey, just ran away again to get 49 necrotic stacks. So one more necrotic stack, you would literally not have been healable. He had it was, I mean, a lot of healing debuff there of 98 reduction, but fortunately did get away in time, as Pixel is just working to finish off the remaining of the trash on the stairs. Now, some teams from here on out just use Mass Stealth and go straight to Acquisier. Some teams chew through this trash. We'll have to see what Pixel does. We haven't seen them in action in this dungeon. Actually, we haven't seen either of these teams in action in this dungeon this week. 430 indeed does get the Mass Stealth up, and they will be heading over to Acquisier's platform. Both teams have done this as they wait for Acquisier to spawn. Now, I'm not seeing any extra trash pulled on top of... Oh, they actually pulled up the stairs, but I don't know if that was intentional, because nobody else in the group on Pixel's moving as Comey dies, so he didn't manage to get his Shadow Meld off properly. They're going to have to do the res on the side. Ones are casting Mass Resurrection here, as Team 430 is actually dealing with the very trash that killed Pixel's tank.
Yeah, Team 430 actually dealing with this trash pack, as you mentioned. And again, all of these trash packs here before the first boss, before Acquisier, are just pretty dangerous. You see Inspiration dropping so low again. Just seems like there's a bunch of casts that went through, and with all of the necrotic stacks, you see the Cenarian Ward going out, but it's just not healing anything. Kiki just struggling to keep Inspiration alive. And finally, the necrotic stacks fell off, so Inspiration can go back in and finish off the rest of the trash pack, and they should be fine from now on. But Comey actually getting stunned from one of those Templars.
And he has 72 stacks of necrotic. I think that's a 7, not a 1. Yeah, he's literally unhealable. I mean, he's going to go down. You know, it's ironic that one of the most dangerous mobs, because they're in a high group, are those little yellow blobs in the dungeon, because the tank grabs aggro and they each give you necrotic every time they successfully melee. So Comey had 72 stacks of necrotic. That's a huge damage over time component. Plus, of course, you're just not healable. So he goes down. They don't have the battle res as mentioned earlier. 5 minutes left on that. Mid goes down here, and they're just looking to finish off these very dangerous casters. Those water blasts going out right now are what almost killed Inspiration earlier. They do an incredible amount of damage, even in a tyrannical environment, and it looks like they're not going to be able to get the job done, as they're all pretty much healed up. There's no interrupts going out on the Spiritualist. One Zora is the only one alive with Fame. Fame should be going down momentarily, and there's no way they can survive for long enough to get the Shadow Meld off on One Zora. He's just kind of running around trying to buy time, but that's going to be all she wrote, likely.
Yeah, it seems like he wants to kite a little bit longer just to get his Shadow Meld back up. We saw the knockback come out and the free come out of the freeze. Now he's just trying to kite, trying to get the Shadow Meld back up. You can see the cooldown on the Rogue and on the Demon Hunter. Unfortunately, we don't see it on the Priest, but it should be around the same timing as the rest of the group. And there we go. He did manage to pull off the Shadow Meld, but at this point, the rest of the group is already back, so it only really saved them the 5 seconds from the death. Didn't really save them anything else. Team 430 did engage Acquisier and are also committing the Bloodlust to the boss.
Yeah, it's weird why they didn't just choose one or the other. They could have either group released and all Shadow Melded back together, or just waited for him to res everyone once he Shadow Melded. But in this way, it's the worst of every world. In fact, Comey doesn't even get the Shadow Meld off. He just dies on the way. So it seemed that they should have just waited for One Zor to get that successful Shadow Meld off, as scary as it was. Inspiration having a little charge past the boss there, almost went right off the edge. A bit scary, but we do not charge pathing sometimes for warriors, puts you behind the mob, quite frustratingly so. So Team 430 here, 70% on Acquisier. They're approaching rapidly for that transition phase at 50. Warrior, of course, will split into those 3 well-designed Aqualings. God, I love this boss thing here. As Pixel is at 13% still, and is dealing with the trash that initially wiped them, has already caused them 2 deaths on top of it just because Komi failed the skip, and they do have Aquasir spawned in the back here, but things are starting to unravel a bit, and not to mention the 6 death difference on the board.
Wait a second, wasn't this trash pack that they were trying to skip in the first place and what they wiped to because Komi wasn't able to de-aggro them? I just feel like, Either way, Komi having a lot of trouble again, going up to over 20 stacks, but this time around he starts kiting earlier, so he should be able to survive. I think the biggest problem was Komi actually getting hit by the Templar stun, which is a frontal cone cast that is easily dodgeable because the mob does not follow you around. It just it just fixates you and then casts, so you can just walk out of it basically. But Komi already getting stunned twice, unfortunately for Pixel there, and going down, just getting too many necrotic stacks while he's stunned, and then going down afterwards. Team 430, on the other hand, have a death coming in from the Surging Rush. Yeah, very great boss loot.
I mean, it's not my fault, you know, get hit and fall off the edge just to wave it. But fortunately for them, the corpse is on the platform, so Kiki's able to get the battle res off. Neither team now having a battle res available for about 3 minutes. So certainly backs to the wall right now, especially after Aquasir. A lot of danger coming in with the mobs. And notice how these teams also have not pulled Heldis. We did see Heldis pulled yesterday by who was it? Black Mamba and AAA. So they did pull Heldis on top of it, dangerous as it might be for the tank with the stacking necrotic. But Heldis casts so frequently that necrotic's really not much of a concern for the tank. So these teams are just playing it generally safe and making their healer's life a bit easier, at of course the cost of clear efficiency here. Pixel 7 deaths still versus Team 430's 2 now because of the death there for I Have No Phone. I mean 25-second death difference between them. It's still very early in the dungeon, Nagura. So let's not spell disaster yet just for that death difference.
Yeah, Team 430 did now actually pull Heldis on top of the boss, so they just wanted to play it a little bit safer. Didn't pull Heldis at the very start, but just waited for the intermission phase to be over and then get Heldis on top. Now this is going to mean that it's going to be a little bit less efficient as with teams that pull it from the get-go, just because once the boss dies, Heldis is not going to be dead. So they will have to finish Heldis off after Aquasir and going to have to spend a little bit more time. But it's safer this way because you don't have Heldis AoEing your whole team throughout the whole boss fight. So there we go. Heldis needs to be finished off still. Team 430 are on 28% trash. So Pixel quite a bit behind just because, of course, the wipes they were having. And I'm also wondering what Pixel is saving their bloodlust for, because they've been holding it for 9 minutes at this point. Oh, there we go, intermission phase.
Well, it is a well-known fact that this last final Aqualing in the transition phase is the most evil and dangerous of the 3. So killing it in a very prompt manner is very important as the Aqualings splee around the arena. Now, they have a nice bunch up of 2 of them there, so good cleave coming in for the melee. You can see they kind of get in there as quickly as possible as Komi makes sure to tank the other one. Now, you always want to stay in melee range of these, else they'll cast Water Blast on various members of the group, and it hurts way more than their pretty insignificant melee. So doing well there. And you know, also just one thing to point out, 1-0's damage on this boss was a fair bit higher, almost double the amount of Kiki's on the side of Team 430. So perhaps one of the advantages of Dispriest. But then again, Kiki also not exactly playing that offensively. We've seen some Restaurateurs absolutely just pump out crazy damage. In fact, yesterday we saw, you were noting one of the Restaurateurs just doing insane amount of damage using High Noon Trade and triple undulating tides on top of it. So looks like Kiki's just taking it a bit easier here, as Pixel should be easily, hopefully, downing Aquasir, who is now at 70%. Team 430 dealing with this Void Emissary that most teams opt to skip, though, Nagura.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, I don't actually dislike the fact that they used the Bloodlust for the intermission phase here, just because Necrotic actually does make the intermission phase more dangerous on top of having Tyrannical as well. Just because you need to be in melee range so they don't cast that Sea Blast, right? Which just does an insane amount of damage. And if you are in melee range and off-tank them, then you do get Necrotic stacks applied from those Aqualings. So if the whole group does have Necrotic stacks on them and then you have to heal the AoE damage as well, it's pretty dangerous. So I don't dislike the fact that Pixel used it for there just for a little bit of safety. Now they do single pull Heldis though, so that's pretty inefficient. So they have to single target her down. Team 430 on the other hand did go through that area pretty quickly. As you mentioned, did kill the Void Emissary, not choosing to skip it, and that's something Team 430 is not really good at. Tettles just talked about it in the analyst clip. He said that they're not really good at shadow melting or using their shadow melt to its full potential.
Yeah, I mean, the reasoning they did it is because we do know Void Emissaries have true sight, and therefore you can't just shroud through them with a rogue. So they killed it off in order to be able to safely shroud afterwards past Rune Carver's Soren, one of the other mini bosses. Speaking of mini bosses, the third mini boss in the dungeon, the the large elemental on the bridge. Why am I forgetting the name of it right now? But the Guardian Elemental, there it is. Usually, we've seen actually kind of a mix between the West and East of killing it now sometimes, because we do know this dungeon has rebalanced in trash. Cinderella, unfortunately, falling there on the side, did not manage to get the proper skip off with the rest of the team. So rather than putting the team in combat, he decided to die. They res him up on the other side safely of the bridge and are now dealing with the apprentices that lie before the second boss of the dungeon with Brother Ironhull and Gale Caller Faye. Pixel here also dealing with the Void Emissary. I'm not really sure. These teams love their Void Emissaries, but nonetheless, they do decide to chisel through it and will likely be using their Shadow Meld past Runecarver Soren at some point as well.
Yeah, and Team 4, this area here is also pretty dangerous because, mainly because of the necrotic affix, really. Just because there is not that much room to kite at all in this area, because they did not finish off the bridge and the elemental, therefore there's no way for the tank to kite backwards. And this small little area doesn't even provide that much space to kite in a circle either. So once you have those small little initiates, which just apply necrotic to your tank on every single melee attack, it is going to be pretty dangerous for them. That's why Inspiration actually goes pretty slowly, but Cinderella unfortunately going down very early in the pool. They do have one battle rest available, and it's coming up from Kiki immediately.
Yeah, Cinderella just not making it to the ball tonight. Team 430 here, 4 deaths on the board now. Once again, no battle rest for another 8 minutes, and they still have to deal with what is a pretty scary boss. And Nigger, I'm going to be curious with these two teams, because neither of the two teams yesterday did it. They didn't use that ledge strat that avoids the tornadoes. I'm not really sure why they're not choosing to get that going, but we'll see if either of these two teams decides to use that. What seems to be at least generally accepted as a more superior or safer strategy, for lack of any other term. So Team 430 here, chewing through the rest of their trash as Pixel is dealing with a smaller apprentice bolt right before Soren's room.
Yeah, we saw Team 430 actually dealing with it pretty well. They didn't have too many problems with that necrotic stack here on Inspiration. Now they only have the initiates left. They want to make sure that they succeed them pretty well, so Inspiration doesn't go down because of the necrotic. But the good part about necrotic is that they actually changed it over the course of BFA, that it does disappear off of the tank as soon as he's out of combat. So once those initiates are down, the necrotic will disappear and he's going to be just fine. And they're going to be able to engage the boss without any battle rests ready though.
Yeah, it's going to be scary. And it looks like they are going up there. We can see the yellow or Star World marker already up on the ledge, but it seems like the only person going up is Kiki. Actually, no, the bosses are being slowly dragged over, so the melee just wants to get their damage in before heading up. Maybe not. Maybe they're just staying down there and it's really just Kiki going up, so he's having the safer, easier time. But the melee are standing in that kind of double boss cleave area, and they're just hoping they don't get hit, and the healer getting some solar wraths in from the top as well. Elo going down on the side of Pixel, unfortunately. That have they pulled Soren? Yeah. Runecarver Soren is in there, so we've seen him pulled sometimes, but pretty rarely. Just does a tremendous amount of damage with his carved flesh channel that you want to be standing in that rune on the floor, and that rune provides a 70% damage reduction buff when you stand in it for either yourself or, of course, enemies. So you have to dance well around it as Komi dipping quite low here, gets out and right back in as those necrotic stacks reset. But Elo, unfortunately, they do have the res, but they're choosing to hold on to it. And Runecarver Soren has a lot of health in Igura.
Yeah, I actually wonder why Elo even went down, because he seemed like his body was inside the zone that does provide the damage reduction. So maybe he just walked into the zone too late with the carved flesh on him, or it just died through it, which the carved flesh does do a lot of damage even if you stand inside. As you can see, Elo just dropping very low there. So either way, Elo going down costing him a little bit of time, especially because they now committed the battle rest. So, they were just wasting some time. They could have committed the battle rest either immediately or just not committed at all. You have to make one decision. If you just do it half-assed, you just do the middle way, then you just lose a lot of time. As Team 430 is still fighting Gale Caller Faye and Brother Ironhull, and yeah, they're not using this life strategy, it's just having Kiki up there. Yeah,
and Inspiration goes down just as they pop their Bloodlust. They don't have a battle res available. They're gonna need to reset this boss or have a full team wipe. Obviously, option A is superior to option B, but that is just the lesser of two evils. You don't want to be doing either of those. Here comes the reset right now. Inspiration just got clocked. Brother Ironhull, we do know now, this doesn't happen often, but Brother Ironhull gets a very substantial buff, Blessing of Iron, or Blessing of the Tides, something like that. So it just gives him a tremendous amount of increased physical damage done. So if Inspiration gets hit by the melee, hit by the frontal, in combination with, let's say, a melee from Gale Caller Faye or a tornado or something, that's it. Easy one shot, and that's exactly what happened. Inspiration does go down. They have to reset the boss, and I mean, he went down down the second they pop Bloodlust. So they just wasted their entire Bloodlust on this, which opens up the path for Pixel, who is now doing their Guardian Elemental skip on the bridge to start to catch up just a bit. They're still behind by 3 deaths. They still have all the trash in front of the Council boss here to do. Elo going down yet again, and they don't have a battle res. He's just going to have to say Elo from the other side now.
Unfortunately, they did pull the patrol, which is not really intended. So if they wouldn't have pulled the patrol, then they could have just mass rest Elo up. But at this point, they just have to finish it off. Thankfully, it's only 2 mobs, so there should be a right to do that. But yeah, Team 430 actually losing so much time because of this Bloodlust that they committed. One more thing as well to note about this boss is that this zone on the ground that you can see that looks the exact same way as the Zorn zone that does the damage reduction. The zone here though actually does remove all the debuffs off of you. They're Demon Hunter going down. They don't have a rest, so I'm not completely sure if they want to just... Oh yeah, they're just resetting one more time. They just don't want to waste a lot of time and finishing off the boss with only 2 DPS.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a double reset here. I mean, look, it's better than the alternative of full team wipe and they have to do all the skips again, certainly, but this is 2 resets already. They did so many resources, just not including Bloodlust. I mean, they're going to have their battle res coming up in 3 minutes, so they'll have that if needed really soon enough. Coney here starting to accrue a lot of necrotic stacks as to deal with a lot of the apprentice trash in front of the boss that Team 430 is having quite the struggle with. Teams still at 3 deaths difference apiece. We did have the Demon Hunter go down on the side of 430 versus the Rogue on Pixel side. Comey just not having a lot of room to kite right now, but he decides to just brute force it right now and just chill on top of the mobs, but says that's too much and starts to head off, resetting those necrotic stacks, but so many of those water blasts are coming through.
Yeah, so what I wanted to mention about the zone on the ground here on Brother Ironhall and Gale Color Face, the zone actually clears all of your debuffs, so it also clears necrotic. That's something the tanks should be playing around because, you know, you can reset the necrotic otherwise too by just leaping away and cutting the boss, but it's a lot simpler if you can just make one step into the zone, as Inspiration actually just showed on Team 430, resetting his necrotic there. But yeah, this time around they actually have to finish off the boss if they don't want Pixel to catch up to them, because Pixel, they are behind in raw damage speed, but they're ahead in trash. They have more, a lot more trash than Team 430 once they finish off all of this area in front of the boss. So Pixel can choose to skip a lot of the trash later on. So Team 430 definitely needs to down this boss now without any more problems.
This is certainly closer than we think, at least at this point in the dungeon. We do know there's a lot of danger coming up in Volsdithstrom, and it depends what the 2 teams want to do. Neither team, actually, one of the teams, of course, running an Unholy DK, so they technically have that potential to one-phase the boss. We'll see if that's even part of their plan in the first place. But we got to get through the second boss first, as the initiates are pulled here, the final initiates before they approach the second boss, as Team 430 finally gets Gale Caller Fade down to 35%, Brother Ironhall sitting at 71%, and Brother Ironhall drops his reinforcing word right now. They have to pre-move out of it in order to not let the bosses, because as you mentioned, Nagura drops all debuffs, including on the bosses though, so any damage over time or any debuff effects were just cleared on both bosses because Inspiration was just a bit too slow to move out. He gets clipped by the frontal and as a result rooted. You can see the buff up on Brother Ironhall right now. He is huge and he will do a lot of damage to your tank if you're not paying attention there. Bit of a tornado clip there for the Fury Warrior, but able to be healed up by Kiki as Pixel has committed their Bloodlust to the pull and are starting to catch up.
And look at the Assassin Rogue doing so much damage here in the opener with the Bloodlust as well. The army also coming out from mid, from the Unholy DK, so both of them doing insane amounts of bursts here. Maybe there's a chance that they can catch up just with their single target damage. Now they also have their battle rest available soon, both of those teams, so if anything goes wrong, they do have one rest available to them. Both of the teams only having one person that can rest though, so on Team 430 it's only the Rested Druid, and on Team Pixel it's only the DK. And now I'm not completely sure how good a Disc Priest is at doing damage with the buff on the very last boss. Oh no, 2 people actually getting hit by the frontal.
You hate to see it. Oof. Double death there, and they can only get one of them up as the battle res is just about to pop. I'm going to be curious to see if what are they going to do? Are they going to commit? They've already committed their Bloodlust in so many CDs. They do have a battle res available. Fame does get pulled up, and it looks like they're going to try to finish this boss as a 4-man group, whereas Team 430, of course, had that struggle earlier, decided to reset it immediately. Fair to them, though, it's their tank that died, so they kind of had to reset it, at least the first time during their Bloodlust. Brother Ironhall, though, for Team 430 is down to 25%, so they will be killing the boss off soon, whereas Pixel, I mean, once Pixel gets Faye down, they can kill the boss, but it's going to take them so long.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, they can... No, not even that will make sense. Yeah, they're just going to be behind in dungeon speed just because of this one death here. And you can see, actually, I'll also wonder why they didn't rest the Rogue, because the Rogue seemed like he was doing quite a bit more damage than the Demon Hunter. And the Demon Hunter also does not have the meta available, so interesting choice on the rest there. Either way, Team 430 are downing the boss right now, so they're going to move on. They are on 61% trash, so they probably have to deal with some of those enforcers, which can definitely cause a lot of trouble with the necrotic stacks.
It looks like they heeded your word earlier, and they are killing the Ritualist. That opens up the shortcut coming from the beginning of the dungeon. Should you wipe later on by killing this Ritualist, you can see that kind of little sparkly brazier in the corner. Now, that will be an available teleport from Aquasir's area over here should somebody die. A bit of damage coming in on Onezor as he takes one of the clips from the Tornadoes with a 5-stack, and a lot of casts going in for Faye. Nobody's interrupting them, but Onezor manages to finally drop his stacks right before what would have been a lethal hit from her Slicing Winds goes through by standing in the zone from Brother Ironhall right now. Galecaller Faye finally falls here, and now we start the long grind of killing 60% of a tyrannical boss's health for Pixel for Brother Ironhall with a 4-man group. That's going to take them a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wonder, at this point, they might as well just pull like an Enforcer on top, maybe, like the Patrol that we see other teams pull on top, because if it's going to take so long, you might as well just cleave another ad on top of it. Either way, this is going to take them a long time. As Team 430 did down the Ritualist, that does enable this skip, and now they're going to do a Shadow Meld skip to get past this trash area that no one really wants to deal with. I don't think I've seen a single team that wanted to deal with this room that we just saw Team 430 skip. They have to do a lot of those bridge packs now. We will see how that goes, especially because of those tentacles that require the tank to stay in melee range, so therefore he cannot kite away if he does have a lot of necrotic stacks.
Yeah, certainly not. And as we've seen already in the dungeon, they're not running Dwarf either, so they have no way to get rid of those necrotic stacks with Stone Skin, or Stone Form, excuse me, on that 2-minute cooldown. Brother Ironhall here, 20%, so it looks like Pixel is chewing through well as we see Tree of Life pop by Kiki right now, just making sure everyone's healed up nice and healthy. But really, most of the danger damage in this pack comes on the tank, as you have to move around constantly for Mental Assault and make sure that the team is helping you interrupt Rip Mine. But I say that too soon, as Cinderella drips low and procs cheat Death. Inspiration has double Rip Mine cast on him. You can see that 2-stack debuff. That's 20% max health reduction after a very substantial Shadow Nuke. That was really close, because on top of the 35 necrotic stacks, that is a nightmare to heal. So they got a lucky one there. Anything longer, one more cast would have gone through. Mobs lived a bit longer, that would have been a tank death easily.
Yeah, now they do have the battle res available for Team 430, so if something goes wrong, just like this close call on the tank, then they can get them back up. But yeah, one more bridge pack they have to do, and then they're basically done. They only have to deal with the 2 Dweller packs in front of the next boss, and then they can get the rest of the percentage with the eels from the last boss room, and the Denizen trash pack that is standing in front of the last boss as well.
Yeah, so Team 430, I think with the rebalance percentages in this dungeon on non-teaming, it's about 84% that you need. It used to be 80% in the previous season, but because of the rebalance, it's about 84, as the Eels give less percent now. So they should be able to hit it with the remaining Dwellers in the next room, as Pixel is now chewing through their Ritualist as well, opening up that shortcut just in case. They said it's 70% trash, and we'll be moving on to the bridge momentarily as well. Team 430 getting right in on the action on the Dwellers right now. We can see an Emissary of Tides on the right side, very dangerous combined in this Dweller pack, because it does prevent any form of interrupt or crown control, as we know. So these Dwellers will just free cast Lash on the group. They've done well with the first one, and they've already started the RP, or the role playing, in order to start the Lord Stormsong event. Now they move over here with the Emissary of Tides, and they don't care to pull it out. They just want to cleave everything down together as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and Pixel dealing with the same mobs that Team 430 was dealing with earlier, the Enforcer and the Ritualist. Now they will probably do a skip here as well, and they can just leave out some of the trash on the bridge that Team 430 had to kill, just because Pixel did have a higher percentage of trash when they got to the boss before. So they can definitely skip something here if they choose to do so. Team 430, on the other hand, they're done with the Dwellers, so they are going to engage Lord Stormsong once their RP is over. And this boss, in theory, should not be causing any trouble for them, but it is a tyrannical environment, so you definitely want to watch out for it anyway.
Low Storm Song already down to 90% there. And yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Not the most dangerous boss in the world, but, you know, any combination of a Rip Mind or something like that on a low melee member can do a substantial amount of damage. Void Bolt needs to be properly interrupted. You need a 2-man DPS rotation interrupt or a 15-second DR interrupt on him. One of those once in a while will be that Spell Reflect on a 25-second cooldown. Just came back up for Inspiration now. As he does use it, and immediately reflects a pretty substantial amount of health back at Lord Stormsong. Pixel here on the trash right now on the bridge, but so much damage on Komi, they're not able to stabilize. We have Pain Suppression running. It should fall off in just 3 seconds here. He goes down. They don't have a battle res, and all those mobs are anywhere between 10 and 50% HP. There's no way, I don't think at least, that they're going to finish this up, but they're sure as heck trying right now as they cleave everything down, and it actually looks like they might be able to. There's a caster, a ritualist there, the Depthbringer rather, that's still at 50% HP, but these don't exactly melee very hard, so as long as you're getting interrupts on their dangerous cast, I think they'll sneak by this one, Nagura.
Yeah, unfortunately, we also had a death on Team 430 for the Fury Warrior as the Mindbender mind-controlled the Fury Warrior on the very first cast. Because there were not enough orbs for him to reach 50% HP through the orb damage, he had to jump into the pool that you can see in the back there, and he didn't jump out fast enough, so once he got out of the mind control, he just died right there, so they had to commit the battle rest to get him back up. Second mind control on Kiki though, going a lot better there this time around, and now they're out of battle rests, so they have to be careful as the warrior actually just got stunned back there from the orbs.
Do you remember that time when they started the boss and you said not really that much could go wrong on this boss, and then they had a death, and now
they still have to watch out because it's tyrannical.
That's true, but it's hard to watch out when you're underwater. It's difficult to see under that foggy, evil shadow water. But Team 430 here, 86% trash still, slightly above, I believe, what they need to be at, as we mentioned in the last stream. Lord Stormsong at the last 1/3 of HP as he now just hits sub 30 with another big Spell Reflect worth of 3% boss health damage on a tyrannical boss from Inspiration there. Pixel, 85% trash. They're actually over clearing here. This extra bridge trash is going to put them close to 90%, so I'm not sure what they're going to skip. At this point, they certainly don't need to do anything else here leading to Lord Stormsong's room. They don't need to touch the Dwellers on either side, and I guess a couple of the Eels don't really need to be touched either. We'll see. Team 430 here, 20% on Lord Stormsong. They're certainly in the prime position to take this match. I don't want to caster curse them, but we did see a lot of issue from our two Eastern teams yesterday competing in this dungeon on Volzith. I mean, it was just wipe after wipe after wipe between both teams.
Yeah, that was definitely some interesting dungeon to watch. But either way, one small tip that I just wanted to mention for the Mindbender here is that there's actually all of your defensive buffs that you have as you on your character do get applied once you are mind controlled as well. So for example, Demon Hunters, they do have the passive magic damage reduction on them. Once they are mind controlled, you just want to try to use any sort of physical attacks that you have available to you because they do get less magic damage. And then on top of that, if you have any sort of form that you can get out of, like Moonkins for example, they do have more armor in that form, so they want to try to go out of the Moonkin form once they do get mind controlled. Unfortunately, no Moonkins in the MDI.
Imagine seeing a Moonkin in these dungeons, Nagura.
I've never seen one before in my life.
We as well live in a fantasy world here, but Team 430 has finished off Lord Stormsong, is headed down into the underwater passage where those very dangerous jellies will stun you for 8 seconds, and you can't get out of it with any form of immunities. So they're being extra careful. As you can see, the Fury were absolutely hugging the top of this pathway, making sure that he doesn't get hit, but a lot of damage in right off the bat on mid, who was just the brunt of the Rip Mind. He's not getting a dispel at all. There's just
he's mind controlled, yeah.
Oh, what a bad combo. Ones are getting mind controlled and the Rip Mind going in. Now, the problem is, you can't really fault...
Not doing enough damage.
This is... Yeah, okay, they're good. They got him out. But you can't really blame mid for this because I'm sure those at home are looking and are going, well, he has anti-magic shell. Why don't you just anti-magic shell? Now, it goes twofold. He wouldn't pre-anti-magic shell the Rip Mind. He's waiting for the mind control to go off. But once he saw that he got the Rip Mind cast on him, he was taking damage from it, and their healer was mind controlled, why would you not pop your anti-magic shell?
Yeah.
It would have saved your life there. So, bit of a misplay for them, and now they had a death because of it. They will have a battle res coming up in about 20 seconds, so that is a bit of their saving grace. But it looks like they're resetting the boss.
Because he's the only one who can battle rest, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Well, it is overnight, Nagura. You never know. So, Team 430 here taking advantage of this, or just continuing to truck through the dungeon as they started their first transition phase. They will also, of course, have their battle res available in a moment, but hopefully they won't need to do it.
Yeah, we see Team 430. Now, on this boss, we want to watch out for Kiki's damage, as he is the one with the buff. You can see it in the group frames on the top. It does stack up all the way to 9, and once it's on 9, you do get the full damage increase from it. It also reduces your max HP though, so you want to make sure that you don't get hit by any sort of ability, because almost anything that you get hit by will just immediately one-shot you. So you want to watch out for that. One more thing that the Eastern region has to watch out for with these affixes is skittish, actually. Skittish, usually not a thing that people have to worry about, because, you know, the rogues have tricks and the warriors do a lot of damage. But the warriors with necrotic, they have to watch out that they have to kite as well. And the healer generating so much aggro from the healing and the damage that they're doing, that skittish actually can cause some problems for them.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you're absolutely right. Skittish not usually a concern, and a lot of where that danger will come in is not even these denizens or the boss himself. It's actually going to be the eels, if they combine eels on top of the boss. That's where we saw some issue come in for random healer Gibbs yesterday. I'm not sure if they're going to do that on this side. I mean, they're only going to hit about 91% trash. I don't think they've pulled any of the eels, if I'm not mistaken, on the side of Team 430 yet, so they still have all 4 eel packs around the side of the room, as Pixel has once again re-engaged Lord Stormsong, fully healthy, everybody alive, and they do have their battle res available this time. Should anyone except for the DK go down on their side, they will be able to battle res them if they want. 13 deaths here for Pixel right now versus Team 430's 8, and they're looking to pop their bloodlust right now and just get on this boss as quickly as possible. I don't think they're going to be able to one-phase it though.
So Kiki actually playing Guardian Affinity, which is very interesting, because there's no way of them to do the cat weaving damage that we see from other healers come out on this boss, because if you don't run Feral Affinity, you don't actually have the abilities in cat form. You don't have Shroud, you don't have Rip, you don't have any of those abilities that are doing the most damage from the rest of druids on this boss. This is why you can also see Kiki maybe not doing as much damage as the other healers, because he needs to be spamming that Brav and just applying Sunfire and Moonfire. This is a little bit safer, right, because you don't have to go in melee range, and therefore you have an easier time dodging the tentacles and the silence zone. But usually we do see healers just committing to that min-maxing and just committing to the Feral Affinity just to get the extra damage here.
The thing is also, what's interesting about Kiki is he's not running the Ashara staff at all. He's running just a generic staff. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that is. Fame going down on the side of Pixel, because I believe they did have once again another mind control on one Zor. Fame had a brunt of the damage yet again. He goes down. Comey goes down. They do have their battle res available, but they got to do it quick before Lord Stormsong casts another Shadow Bolt as Mid runs away with Anti-Magic Shell. Here comes the Void Bolt. Unfortunately, he had pre-popped Anti-Magic Shell. I guess they're going to reset it here and not do the battle res, even though the boss was at 17%. So out they go. This time they would have the battle res available. DK's available, but they said, you know what, we'll reset the boss at 17%. And just not opt to finish it off. So yet another reset for them, as Team 430 is most definitely going to get another transition, because by not transitioning it the first time and not dealing with the abominations, the little gooeys that come in on the side, each one of them gives 10 energy to the boss. There's 5 of them, so by the time they're finished with their transition, they wake up to a boss, or they come back to a boss that's already at 50 energy before the next transition.
Yeah, they still have to deal with the 10% trash that they have left to reach the 100, so they need to do the eel pack still once they come out of the next intermission phase. If they want to play it completely safe, in theory they could finish off the boss first and then deal with the eels, but then the healer also loses the damage buff. Now he doesn't have Feral Affinity, so maybe he wouldn't even help that much anyway with the eel packs, because you don't have Swipe available without Feral Affinity. So either way, maybe they just choose to play it safe here. Those eel packs, they are quite dangerous though, because of the necrotic affix, just because not only do they apply necrotic, they also apply a shadow bleed effect that stacks and does do a lot of damage. And it will apply to the closest target too, so once the tank starts kiting, it can apply to the melees around. Usually not a big deal for those kind of teams, but it can always cause some trouble.
Can always cause some. Actually, that's part of what we saw the healers go down to yesterday.
Yeah.
It's very easy to pull aggro on those eels, and as soon as you get one of that dot or damage over time application, that's over. Kiki finally topping the damage meters. There you go, that Guardian Affinity spamming that Soul Wrath as much as his little heart can take. 7% on the boss right now. They should be able to finish this off. They still have, as mentioned earlier, the quadruple eel packs along the outside. Pixel here, third time is the charm at Lord Stormsong, 67% right now on the boss, 16 deaths. I'm still not really sure why. Maybe Titles will talk about it later, but I'm still really not sure why they didn't just opt to use the battle res. I guess
I think the healer was mind controlled.
But I mean,
like forever. Like they didn't get him out of the Mindbender.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, so Team 430 is pulling those eel packs now. Again, if they're watching the stream, they know they're really far ahead at this point, so they, in theory, could just pull one pack at a time, but it seems like they're pulling two together. You want to watch out a little bit with those eel packs because they tend to reset if you tank them on top of those ledges in weird spots, so you want to make sure you watch out a little bit for that, as Inspiration does have a lot of necrotic stacks. He just wants to kite at this point, does not want to get any more damage from those eels. And now you can see the shadow debuffs stacking on top of the melee. It's just because the tank is kiting, so it will apply to the closest target, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so certainly pretty dangerous, but I mean, they've already dealt with the encounter, so any risk of the healer accidentally dying or anything like that is fine. They're taking it nice and slow right now. Virtually no chance of Pixel catching up at this point. I very much doubt Team 430 is going to wipe to some eels present at the end here. Here come the final 2 eel packs right now, and they will be able to clean this up and sweep the series to nothing. But speaking of cleanup, I mean, Nagura, this was not the kind of performance you want to see when you're starting to go up later against teams like even Black Mamba, which didn't have the best performance earlier, and let alone Buff Warrior and Nerf Rogue. But
Team 430, though,
the revelers on the side, the revelers are probably going to be the only ones having a good time in this dungeon by the end of it, as it will just be a bit of a slugfest, as dictated earlier. The double self up on both sides right now as they start heading in and getting ready for what I would assume would be a pretty substantial pull, and Void Emissary getting tagged there as well on the side of One Last Chance. They do line of sight it around the corner. Army is popped. Tree of Life is popped, and I'm expecting at any moment Zyra to see the Bloodlust as well.
Yeah, the Bloodlust should come out here for sure, especially in Fortified with this massive pull they're doing. They might save it for a little longer, like while they wait for extra mobs to come in, and I would expect that when that final Peacekeeper comes in, there it goes. The Bloodlust does finally get popped. And yeah, a Blood DK, Unholy DK is actually doing quite a bit of damage here as well, like you'd expect.
Yeah, that's what you like to see, and this is actually quite good. They killed the Void Emissary off before, got a second pulse on the group. A lot of damage came in. Char is playing really well there, pre-popping that shield wall before things started getting nasty, not even taking the risk of getting popped early. Still holds on to his avatar here right now, just wants to play it a bit safe. We're in a volcanic, in a quaking environment here on the Motherlode as well, but keep in mind, we're skittish, which you saw in the last dungeon, but the skittish isn't as dangerous here as long as you produce enough threat. Even if the tank, you need to start kiting for safety because of the Peacekeepers, what have you, you're going to get those Inhale Vapor charges anyways. I mean, it doesn't matter. Skittish, non-factor here, but the quaking can cause a bit of disruption.
Yeah, I mean, the only part of the dungeon that I think skittish is going to be an issue in is that pull that Settles was mentioning. If these teams try to do that massive pull with the Void Emissary right after the first boss, the coin-operated crowd pummeler, if they end up having to wipe and run back for that pull, I mean, Tricks of the Trade is not going to help them. That pull is going to be spread out all over the place. People are going to have aggro on all sorts of different things. Tank is not going to be able to get aggro. That skittish is not going to help there at all. And it's just going to be really bad to see what's going to happen if they actually do end up going for that large pull with the Void Emissary after the first boss. So, yeah, skittish, like you mentioned, with the Rogues, Tricks of the Trade shouldn't be that big of an issue, but I'm just looking at that one pull in particular where it could be.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the pulls here are pretty nasty too early on. And skittish or no skittish, it doesn't matter. When you, as a tank, when you die with 15 mobs around it, you're not getting threat. The only thing that can grab threat on everything there is either a statue from a Brewmaster or an AoE bubble taunt from a Paladin, and neither of those are present here. So Team 430 has committed their Bloodlust to an honestly much more modest pull compared to what we saw on the side of One Last Chance, but they're doing well through it. Neither team has had a death on the side, on either side, so they have access to the battle res as needed. And as we expect to see, it seems more the meta, if you will, this season, that teams are getting to like the 60 to 70% range worth of trash, then doing Crone-operated Crowd Pummeler, and then we have the pull of Doom, if you will.
Yeah, the pull of Doom after the first boss. I think we saw it was from Abracadabra first, where they were in the double Unholy DK, and they pulled everything except for the Void-touched Emissary, and then they just completely melted it, even without Bloodlust. And then, of course, they finish off the trash with the Azerite Extractors, I believe, 4 of those. But, yeah, I'm not really sure if we're going to see that from these teams. I don't think we saw it from them in their first match yesterday, but, I mean, at the same time, there wasn't really that much normal about their first match yesterday either. If I remember properly, I believe Team 430 ended up winning, but it wasn't because they necessarily played better. It just, like, One Last Chance just made more mistakes.
Yeah, no, it's true. And One Last Chance certainly looking like a cleaner team than we saw them yesterday here right now. Even with that first pull was actually really quite impressive. It had 3 Peacekeepers, a ton of mobs, and it was on top of a Void Emissary that most teams would usually avoid. So just crazy amounts of damage, and it was completely safe. Nobody even dipped low. No danger there. Bloodlust was popped properly. So if they continue that kind of play here versus a team like 430 that has been a bit sloppy today, and we already know has a tendency to do slower live key style pulls, they should be able to squeeze the series series out, but there's a lot of dungeon left and a lot of dangerous dungeon left, Zyro.
Oh yeah, and like we mentioned, looking forward to the Tol Dagor for the next match. I mean, that's going to be insane as well. This is a nasty, it's just a nasty matchup in general. But we got to keep it in the Motherlode right now. And I mean, you know, both of these teams are kind of steady as she goes through the dungeon. They're not really going for too big of pulls. I mean, normally when we look at sort of like the faster teams from the Western region, they're probably at around 40 or 50% trash right now. So they're definitely doing a lot more modest pulls. Like I believe right here we'll normally see a team do about 3 Addled Thugs on this pull and like three Peacekeepers as well. But they're just opting for a safer pull.
Yeah, I mean, okay, credit where credit's due. I don't think 50% by this point. That's a bit high on the high end, maybe in the 40 range. What I'm surprised to see, though, is even with that very substantial early pull on from One Last Chance, they haven't really done much after that. They've moved at an equivalent snail pace, if you will, compared to Team 430. I mean, the teams are only 3% trash, between each other. Now, yes, I know it's Motherlode, the most trash-rich, dense, dungeon in all of Battle for Azeroth, but 3% is really just one Peacekeeper. So the difference between the two teams is not very big here, but fairly sizable pull here for One Last Chance right now, for both teams. So they're moving at an equivalent pace right now, which is weird to say if One Last Chance, because yesterday they were certainly moving faster than Team 430, having more ambitious pull than Team 430, but they just kept messing it up. No mess-ups here from them, but they're at the same pace.
And I would say that the pull that both teams are on right now is probably going to be the most dangerous out of any of the pulls they do. One Last Chance actually just finishing off that pull. They had 3 Addled Thugs in there, and at one point 2 of them were buffed by Unhell Vapors. If any of those charges that went off while they were buffed by Unhell Vapors went off at, let's say, the same time as a Quaking, you could instantly see a one-shot on anyone in the group. It would have been nasty to see. Fortunately, it didn't happen for them, so they don't have to worry about that because they're not going to be pulling that many more packs that have multiple Addled Thugs. They only have to make sure they get that one cat interrupt. You can see it's even marked with an X there. They know it's the important mob to be interrupting and focusing on this group. So, I mean, the fact that they were able to deal with that pack, and that's probably the most difficult pack outside of the first pull with Bloodlust, is, these teams have practiced. I mean, it looks good so far.
No, it's certainly very good. And even on Team 430, Kiki there grabbing that soothe on one of the Inhaled Vapor Thugs. So they're certainly doing their part to try and make sure that they mitigate and just get rid of as much damage or avoid as much potential damage in the group right now. Raynan's unfortunately getting charged by one of the Thugs, which immediately procs his Undulating Tides. That procs below 50%, giving you a pretty substantial shield, but then you don't benefit from that nice single target damage effect, which what Zyra, I think per Azerite trade is like 2k DPS, so running triple of that is pretty substantial in the 5 to 6k DPS range, not having that available, so it just takes that much longer to get through some of this trash. Now, it's weird to see that none of these Druids, I guess they're either not thinking about it or, just not wanting to run that risk, but I don't see any Ursul's Vortex being popped ever, which would prevent one of those Thugs charging out far to the Druid and just give them a bit of a safety net if things get dangerous, but perhaps in their opinion, things haven't really been that dangerous yet.
Oh, I'm not quite sure if you can actually predict when the Thugs charges. I'm not sure if it has like an internal cooldown or if there's any add-on similar to what we used at the end of Legion that showed internal cooldowns that can show that. Unfortunately, on the side of One Last Chance and actually Team 30, both teams at the same time, I believe. No, sorry. Misspoke. Only Straw Res goes down for One Last Chance. That is their one battle res that they had available gone, so they won't have another one for another little over 3 minutes here, unfortunately. But like we were mentioning it, Skittish, he's going to have a little bit of a problem with aggro, but he actually does, because he has 2 rogues with Tricks of the Trade, he's able to kind of pull everything together.
2 rogues, Tricks of the Trade, Warriors have 2 taunt. Well, I mean, kind of 2 taunts. You have your base taunt, and then Heroic Leap will reset your taunt. So you get a kind of a freebie when you get up on that 30-ish second CD. I'm not sure if he's running any reduction on the Heroic Leap with his talents right now, but One Last Chance at 47, and a lot of love was given to that pull, and they still have 3 Peacekeepers up. We already had Tree of Life pop from Raynan's. We already had Tranquility pop, because right after, obviously, some of the melee ate the brunt of it. You saw Death Pact popped right away on Cuddles to try and stay alive. So a lot of defensives were used in the making of this film. Finally, Iron Bark coming out of Raynan's on top of Sharis to try and stabilize the situation a bit more. They need to get that Thug down before anything else is nasty. After that, it's really just Peacekeepers. Yeah, they truck the tank, but it's very easy to get away from them if you need. Not so much with a Thug.
Well, so I've seen this actually. So a lot of tanks will have problems with their healers when they actually call for bark. They won't give it to them. You kind of have to make like chicken noises, you have to make barking noises. I saw this from Shakib actually in Legion. That's what he did. He made chicken noises to get bark from his healer. I think that's what JB is used to doing. So maybe that's what the problem was. He was actually calling for bark and he didn't get it, so he had to actually start screaming at his healer for it.
Yes, of course.
It did finally happen. I thought the Demon Hunter went down on that previous pull, but he did actually go down on this pull, and that is Team 430's battle res gone on their side. So both teams neck and neck now, no battle res for them, 1 death on each board. One Last Chance definitely trucking ahead a little bit further in trash percentage.
Sarah, it seemed to be clairvoyant. Can you tell me tomorrow's lottery numbers by any chance? You already predicted that the Demon Hunter was going to die earlier, and that's exactly what just happened moments later.
Yeah, I don't want to say them on broadcast because then the prize would be split between a lot of people. So I'll just give them to you privately later.
I think you can trust that Twitch chat will very nicely hold those numbers for us and not use them for themselves. But Team 430 here now about to get their battle res back. Both teams still not having their battle res. 10-minute cooldown, of course, once the dungeon starts. So another minute or so on that as a 54% trash comes up for Team 430 versus 61% for One Last Chance. Neck and neck in those 1 deaths apiece right now. Now, the only, I would say pretty minor difference between the teams is that there's about a minute and 20, a minute and 15 between their 2 Bloodlust cooldowns. But I still think, or I would assume at least, that both teams are going to commit that Bloodlust to the Pool of Doom after the coin-operated crowd pummeler. 63% now for Team 430 as they wrap up their pull, matching One Last Chance 63%, but they've already started on the next round of trash. So in terms of raw progression through, actually it's just progression period through the dungeon because of the equivalent deaths. One Last Chance certainly in the lead right now.
Oh yeah, I mean they're almost an entire trash pull ahead right now. Like they are almost finishing this pull that they were ahead on, whereas Team 430 has just started. They're cleaving their pull down. The problem is they don't have a Peacekeeper, and that one Peacekeeper is probably worth about the same amount as trash percentage as the entire pull that 430 just did. So it's really important. We always talk about how important pulling as many Peacekeepers as possible at the start of the dungeon is, and One Last Chance has definitely been doing a very good job of being efficient with their pulls, and they are hitting kind of that trash percentage where we talk about them getting into the boss here, and instead of going to the boss, they're just opting to pull more trash. So we might not actually see them save the Bloodlust for the trash. I mean, it looks like it's going to be up for the boss, so they have a choice there.
I mean, to be fair, was it Team 430? We saw 430 in MOTHERLODE yesterday, and we were talking about the Pool of Doom. We've seen Team 430 already in action. Actually, both of these teams I think we've seen in action. And 430 with the Pool of Doom actually ended up just splitting it into 2. So instead of doing a 4-pack pull, they did a 2 and 2, which is still pretty dangerous because they killed it so slowly, but way safer. So I don't think we're even going to get that from their side because we know what kind of gameplay they have at that kind of slow, safe, steady pace. As One Last Chance hit 71% with what I presume will be their final trash pull here, and coin-operated crowd pummeler hasn't already been pulled for Team 430 and is now dropping rapidly with that debuff.
Yeah, I actually remember exactly what happened. One Last Chance was very far ahead in the dungeon, and they attempted the Pool of Doom, as I guess we're coining it now because that's a fun name for it, and they wiped catastrophically. It wasn't even close. They had a terrible-looking wipe on that pull, and then 430 came in, and you know what? They wiped to it. We're taking it easy, like you mentioned. 2 pulls, very safe, no deaths. I mean, I think it meant maybe 1 death, but it looked clean. Like they didn't full wipe to it. It wasn't that big of an issue. So it wouldn't surprise me to see something similar come out from them again. One Last Chance still hasn't pulled the boss. Looks like they're going to be... are they going to be pulling this trash on top of the boss? It looks like they're not. Just going from kind of safer pulls.
They do have the DK, so I know you love to see that. So I guess they're just not taking advantage of that right now. Cuddle's dropping just a bit low. Maybe they're waiting for the Enchanted Emissary to disappear before engaging the boss. She's finally porting away. Takes 20 seconds for that energy bar to decrease on an Enchanted Emissary before they port back to the palace. Team 430, though, just flying away with this run right now as the boss hits 25% and is brought to the middle of the room just to make sure that, of course, when he tries to absorb the coins on the side from the coin toss, there are no extra 10% stacking permanent damage buffs going into the boss right now. Finally, the final foot bombs coming in for Team 430. They're about to down the boss here, and we'll see if they're more aggressive with their Pool of Doom area compared to yesterday. A lot of coins being sucked up here by the boss, but really just doesn't matter as it's about to fall over.
Yeah, the boss would only take 1 milli to the face with that, so yeah, not a big deal for them. One Last Chance has opted to pull just the Peacekeeper when it's left on top of the boss, and they did commit their Bloodlust to this boss as well. This is a fortified boss, so maybe they're just going to opt to play the safe place, the safe strategy. It would make sense at this point because we saw it from them yesterday. They went for the big pull and couldn't pull it off. And maybe they're just opting to go safe. We're seeing Team 430 doing the same strat from yesterday, just taking it nice and easy, only doing 2 packs at a time, and they're just ahead in the dungeon. So if One Last Chance isn't able to pull off the big pull, they're just going to be behind unless 430 wipes.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right, but as safe as it was, this trash, just like the first boss trash full of mech jockeys and the spritzers from the vendors, etc. This trash as well has a lot of splash damage on the group. The throw rock just goes down in random directions. So we actually saw the Fury where when they moved in right away, he dropped to 8% health immediately just from these 2 packs. So a little overzealous by him there. I actually think he was in there before the protware on the first pack, but fortunately no deaths for them as they combine the remaining half of the Pool of Doom here with the patrols. Now there are 3, I believe, Earth Shapers in this group right now. You have to be really careful. Their Earth Shield is certainly something that would be nice to be interrupted. You can consume magic from the Havoc Demon Hunter when that buff goes up, but all eyes and attention go to that Rock Lance. If too many of those Rock Lances leak, it is a tremendous amount of spike nature damage on the tank, not to mention a really nasty damage over time effect.
I mean, yeah, I believe if 2 of those Rock Lances go off, your tank's probably going to die unless you have some massive external, like external cooldowns and healings on them. Like, we've seen so many tanks just instantly flop over on this massive Pole of Doom, like you mentioned. And while we're mentioning the Pole of Doom, looks like One Last Chance also opting to go for just the slower, safer pulls. Now, one thing to mention here, One Last Chance does have more trash count right now than Team 430, so they have that advantage still going for them. But in terms of like just dungeon progression, where the teams are in the dungeon, Team 430 is slightly ahead. So they have the option of pulling trash on top of Azerok if they get to Azerok first, and if they're able to pull that off, they'll still be very far ahead in the dungeon. But I mean, One Last Chance is actually not too far behind. Maybe I was a little overstating how far behind in the dungeon they were earlier.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm, to a certain extent, slightly worried for One Last Chance, because if they have a hiccup, it's kind of weird. You almost can't beat Team 40 at their own game, which is very slow and steady through the dungeon. So I'm a bit upset to see that One Last Chance took this more shy route. I would have loved to see them improve in the original pool that they were trying, but they kind of, just shied out of it, if you will, and just made sure to play it safe. But playing it safe is not what you want to do. I guess if there's any opponent to do it against, it would be Team 430. So hopefully that doesn't kind of bite them in the butt a bit later on. Deathpack's already down here for Cuddles, who's taking a lot of damage from the throw rocks, and their double pull here right now. Rock Lance is being well interrupted on the side of One Last Chance right now. It sits an 88% trash. That should put them in the low 90s. Team 430 still at 83%. So it looks like no extractor play from them either, Zyra. So it looks like they're going to deal with some of the rock elemental gauntlet trash, and perhaps even Taskmaster Ascari at the top of the hill right before Azerok.
Yeah, definitely. And, from a strategic standpoint, what One Last Chance is doing makes perfect sense. If they look at the match from yesterday, they can see, okay, we went for like a normal MDI style pull, we went for large pulls, and we just weren't able to pull it off. And that cost us the match against a team in Team 430 who was doing, like we mentioned so often here, they didn't opt for a slower, safer pull strategy, but they weren't clean at all yesterday either. So if One Last Chance thinks they're a better team, they should be able to beat Team 40 at their own game. And technically speaking, they're being a little cleaner right now. They've got more trash percentage. And in terms of an overall series standpoint, if you look at time trial times, One Last Chance also has a 2-minute faster Tol Dagor time in time trials as well. So as long as they're able to take the Motherlode, in their minds, they should take the series 2-0 as well. So it kind of makes sense to see what they're doing here with this safer pull strategy.
Yeah, it makes sense indeed. But, once again, I was just, while you were talking there, I was looking at One Last Chance, and the reason I was grimacing, because you looked at me and you're like, what's wrong with Salute? The tank actually did eat 2 bolts to the face there, 2 rock lances to the face, and fell to about 30% with the double dot, and then on top of it, Cuddles did quite low. Nobody died, but then it caught my attention that Raynans has already procced his staff. Won't have that available for 5 minutes. Of course, won't be even getting stacks during those remaining 5 minutes. And then it further, once again, draws the question for me, and maybe, maybe Jack can shine some light on this, or Nagura later on this segment, but Kiki's not wearing the staff again. I don't really know if there's any reason as to not wear the Ashara staff ever. Like, it's pretty much just benefit entirely, and you're looking at the Guardian Affinity as well, that he's using Guardian Affinity instead of Feral Affinity. So some I don't want to say weird. Well, okay, weird is perhaps the correct word. Not bad, not good, but some very atypical choices coming out of him compared to pretty much every other Restager that we see at these tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that stands out to me, is he's just opting to go for Guardian Affinity. He's literally saying, you know what, I don't want to do the damage that my healing class is capable of doing. I'm opting to play just incredibly safe. And that's just kind of like, that's not being in the MDI pool mindset. That's, once again, backing up the mindset where you're just playing super safe, only going for like live progression style pulls. I mean, we saw this, I think we saw this even in the MDI back in Legion, where there was a very clear choice between running Guardian Affinity for safety and not running it just for more damage. I mean, even in live keys in Legion, you had healers. I remember in Court of Stars, your healers would play the damage affinity for the entire dungeon, and they swapped to Guardian for the final boss just because you could do that in Legion. So yeah, it's just a weird choice to make in the MDI setting. But if they can win playing safe, there's really nothing wrong with it, but I feel like against better teams, you're not going to be able to do that.
No, you're certainly not. I mean, Buffware and Nerf Rogue had a really good debut essentially for the weekend earlier today, and they just run all over Team 430 at this pace. So. We'll see, if it gets to that point. But both teams on Azerok here is One Last Chance about to hit 40%. So 40% right now for One Last Chance, 60% here for Team 430. Not too much boss health separating them, especially because of this fortified environment. But we do have 1 extra death on the board for Team 430, and still 5% trash. And at this point, 5% trash is starting to be worrisome to me about where they're going to get it. And it just came back to my memory now that what they did was they pulled some of the R&D wing trash with that first I forgot the name of it, the floaty guy. You know, the floaty boy.
Oh, yeah, the floaty guy.
Yeah, the floaty boy.
I can't remember his name either. So.
I can't remember. It's because nobody ever pulls him.
The Mastermind.
The Mastermind. That's right. Yeah,
we
so
got it.
They pull the Mastermind on the side, which gives a fair bit of percentage, and I believe it gives them to 99%, so they needed one bomb at the end. And what that allowed them to do is actually open up a path on the right side that didn't have true sight at all. So they were able to mass stealth through without using their Shadow Meld, which I'm sure is something that Tettles doesn't like to see at all. So not really maybe the most efficient route, but safe. Certainly safe.
And yeah, one last chance. I mean, they're beating Team 430 at their own game. One last chance is saying, you know what? We think we're the better team, so instead of going for the riskier MDI style pulls, we're just going to play safe and beat you at it. So yeah, they're probably a full minute ahead at this point in this dungeon, just based off of time alone. Team 430 still has 5% more trash to go, and that's just going to make the problem even worse. We're going to see one last chance, of course, doing the typical Shadow Meld skip when they get to the third boss, Rix of Flux Flame here. And in a fortified dungeon, there is not an awful lot to wipe to. So, I mean, we'd have a couple deaths in it. Okay, well, never mind.
Sorry, you should just stop talking.
Yeah, you know what? Take it away, Slade. I'm gonna drink here.
You know, as you that delicious energy drink, of course.
Yeah, some water.
Yes, exactly, absolutely. Now, you know, it's funny because as you were talking, you're like, oh no, that's fine. You know, just one death. But the two people who died were their battle reses, and they didn't make it safely to the boss. So, if there's one thing that is going to put Team 430 back into the game, it's a full team wipe for one last chance, and a completely failed skip to Rix of Flux Flame's platform. They're starting again. Raynon's immediately already procs his Undulating Tides. Shars goes in, dies. Raynon's finally safely on the other side, manages to get the Shadow Meld. Here comes a Quaking just to interrupt that Master Res, and the Revitalize finally coming up. So they ate another 3 deaths on top of it with the skip. Now, the skip is certainly doable without any deaths. We've seen it done tens of times from other teams. So double sloppy attempt at the skip, on the side of one last chance, while Team 430 is doing the exact same pull that we talked about yesterday. Just one small pull plus a Mastermind here in the R&D wing. They don't want any weapon. Oh no, actually there is a weapons tester this time. Watch that Echo Blade. It's about to guess at the moment. It does punt players in random directions. They finally get an interrupt last second. And it looks like they did this cleanly, but you know, there's a reason players avoid most of this trash. It's just fairly inefficient. One last chance, I would say, still ahead at this point, Zyro, even with the 30 seconds difference between deaths. But one more slip up like that, and Team 430 is going to take it.
Yeah, they got a chance of coming back. They spent a lot of time dealing with this trash, and like we mentioned about that Mastermind, they're already at 100% trash, and they still have to kill this Mastermind off. So not exactly the most figured out route. Maybe they just pulled a little bit extra, but yeah, that's just not what you want to see.
It is extra because I was about to say, I wasn't looking at the screen when I was about to say it. I said, oh, and of course there's no weapons tester because yesterday they didn't pull the weapons tester. They got them to 99%. All they needed was one bomb. So this time they pulled the extra trash worth with the weapons tester, but they had to pull their Mastermind because their strategy revolves around them running through, as you're seeing right now, through most of the area, mass stealth, and then at the very end, the double Mastermind there prevents them from going any further. So then Inspiration goes off to the side and dies. But he has Shadow Meld. The entire team has Shadow Meld. Why would they not just, even if they get, I mean, the dangerous part that one last chance failed on is that it's tough. You pull so many mobs as you're running through, you might get clipped by a mob casted. Fine, it happens. You had one pack at the very end. The tank could have just run in and everybody could have Shadow Melded. So, I mean, just really, really huge misplay here from them. Have to waste so much time rezzing the tank. There's an extra 5 seconds on the board, and now they're getting ready on Rix of Flux Flame. That is already at 15% for one last chance.
I mean, yeah, this is just really bad inconsistent stuff coming from it. I mean, it's just, I don't really know how to describe it. It's really, there's a lot of questionable plays coming out from Team 430 here, unfortunately. I was going to say something earlier, but you know, when I saw one last chance actually pull off the skip the second time, you know what I miss? I miss back in the spring season whenever these teams would pull off their Shadow Meld skips, and one of the little Risen Souls would run through and just hang out with them while they killed Rix of Flux. So it was a lot of fun for me. I miss seeing that little guy come through.
The little Reaping Mob?
the little Reaping Mob running through. You know, because the Shadow Meld distance wasn't far enough, he'd hang out with them. So, a little unfortunate we can't see that anymore. But one last chance, killed off Rix of Flux Flame, moving on up to the final boss, and they're doing exactly what you mentioned the tank should do. Getting aggro on the pack, letting everyone run by, and then he leaps through and everyone Shadow Melds.
I mean, it's a freebie.
If they actually pull it off.
How does Ken... But he has Shadow Meld too.
He just didn't use Shadow Meld.
Weird. Okay. So anyway, one of the rogues goes down. I was going to say the Warriors is basically a rogue here with that Shadow Meld. They almost do it perfectly, but another res needs to come up here for one last chance. They do have 2 battle reses on the board, so even with all the failed skips and extra deaths, the deaths were kind of between combat, so they were able to just get that rolling. We have Bloodlust popped here on the side of one last chance to get started on Mogul Razdan. Those Boomba bots going off to the side. Sharis already pre-pulling the boss in a position where they're safe from the onslaught of the filled column and row of this grid on the area. But Team 430 was 40% left, 41% left on Rixxa Flux Flame, and a full team wipe coming in for them here. So that is definitely going to seal the deal here, Zyro.
Oh, that is for sure a nail in the coffin. That's about 7 nails in the coffin for Team 430 there. So yeah, I mean, one last chance. They've committed their bloodlust to the first phase of Mobile Razdunk. You know, that's okay. You know, it's fine. Normally we'll see teams when they're in the lead, they'll save it for something safe, like they'll use it in the intermission phase to make sure they have enough healing for the phase. But you got to remember, this is also a fortified boss, so the boss isn't really going to be that dangerous at any point during the fight. Of course, every single time I've said that for the past 3 weeks, the team will wipe to the boss. But you know what? I'm just going to bet that one last chance know exactly what they're doing, and they're going to be playing it safe here.
Should be playing it safe as the oil drums go down here. The boss will be starting his drills momentarily. Now, I got to be careful of the Sky Scorchers here and which direction they jump in as they go towards the middle of the platform. Char is targeted by the first drill smash from the boss. Wants to get rid of that oil drum near the entrance as quickly as possible. Smart play for them just so they could get away from that danger zone area. Team 430 finally starting up again here as Kiki gets back. One more death on the board as somebody needed to pull trash to the side for him in order to be able to get by the double mastermind and get the mass res. Now they'll be starting up again on Rixxa in just a moment.
Yep, I mean, this is a pretty clean phase from them. No disengages through the wall for one last chance either. So
or
great,
down the stairs.
Or down the stairs too. I mean, totally fine from them. That Sky Scorcher going down is pretty much going to mean the end of the fight. I can't see them standing any of these ground effects on Mobile.
All right, Zyro.
That would be really unfortunate from them. I mean, they would have to have both the Druid Healer and the DK go down, so they don't have any battle reses available.
No, that is true, but Boombabot's showering some explosives down onto the ground again as Mogul Razdunk hits 35% right now. Well into the second phase of this fight as Team 430 struggling with some increased damage taken from Rixxa right now. She's just absolutely pummeling the tank. Inspiration having a bit of trouble to survive right now, but finally gets the attention from Kiki as needed. And one last chance on 20% now. Mogul Razdunk done trash, 9 deaths on the board, and it looks like full team wipe will be imminent here yet again for Team 430, Zyro.
Oh, I mean, they were just going for a nice little bath in that. I don't even know what that. What are they putting? Oh, that's Azerite. That's Azerite that they're putting on the ground. How does that hurt you? You put it into your neck, all expand. Whatever. That's interesting. That's what it is. But unfortunately for Team 430, almost another full team wipe. They were able to get the Shadow Meld off for the Demon Hunter and the Warrior as well. So only 3 deaths for them, but I mean, one last chance is finished with the dungeon. So 1-0 for one last chance, and 430 took this last time. So already a vast improvement for one last chance.
Very,
it was just as funny before.
I mean, it's just this is going to be a tough dungeon, and we don't see huge amounts of benefit coming from something like the Frost Mage, which is an extra safety net on the cannons coming up. So this is going to be tough. We saw this dungeon already be tough earlier today, if I'm not mistaken. So these, there's usually 3 affixes we talk about, Zyro, in this dungeon that can cause a lot of issue, especially with something like just Howless or the cannon floor. And of those 3, one, if not maybe the most dangerous, is explosive.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier in the Buff or Nerf Rogue game, where I think we've seen explosive something like 6 or 7 times picked in this dungeon. It's probably the worst affix for this dungeon, especially with the kind of strategy.
Sanguine's up there too.
Sanguine's pretty bad too, just because of how Sanguine has weird effects with 3D modeling. But yeah, it's just
they should do an explosive Sanguine fortified Tol Dagor.
No, Tyrannical. I think Tyrannical would
What's
be
wrong,
harder,
Jack?
right? Because that actually makes the bosses pretty difficult too.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's mean. I'm
Tyrannical
excited.
Overseer Cortex,
Let's do it, Twitch chat.
Great.
Make it happen.
You know what I'd like to see? I'd actually see 3 affixes. I want to see Sanguine, Bolstering, Explosive.
Oof. Okay. Let's focus on the match here. Sanguine down to 55% for one last chance to combine it with a minor amount of trash. Certainly not the same caliber that we see. Well, I was going to say that we see coming out of an Unholy DK, but they do have an Unholy DK, and they were still very shy on the trash flow compared to what we've seen in previous weeks from, I believe, Ashine doing over 3 million DPS by pulling the entire room. Now, Affix is, of course, more forgiving, but you still have 2 Outlaw Rogues that can babysit those explosives quite well and just let the DH do the work.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that earlier. I think what we think is that Raging Affix from the Silk Crabs, I mean, if they all hit Raging at the same time and decide to squeeze one target, that person is going to die. There's nothing you can do about that, especially with no AoE stun in the group outside of maybe the Warrior. But, there's just not a whole lot you can do if all the Silk Crabs rage at the exact same time and start squeezing. So that's probably what it is. What we saw Buff or Nerf Rogue do to kind of combat that is they pulled 2 packs at different times. They pulled 1 pack at the start, then 1 pack after the first upheaval. So we don't see that coming out for one last chance. They're opting to just do only that one first pack. But even then, leaving on top of the boss is much faster than just doing 2 packs and then engaging the boss, which is what Team 430 is opting to do, but I mean, this is kind of par for the course for 430. They're just playing things safe.
I certainly do want to kill Tupac. It's Team 430 here for 13%. They're moving so slowly as well. 88%. I mean, you know, I say that as if it's a surprise, but it's really not, right? The team is known to just move slow and steady. I think they did 2 trash pulls worth, you know, to get the 13%, and then started on the boss, something that One Last Chance is already done with the boss. And, you know, you start looking at the board, you go, oh yeah, but Salute, they have a slight advantage on trash for Team 430, but we know most of that trash, if you deal properly, even with the post-nerf cannons, it doesn't really matter. 7% trash, who cares?
And I think that's where we're going to see most of the time save come in this dungeon. I mean, what's going on right now probably in the end doesn't matter. Once you kill Jess Hallis, it is all trash management. If you can deal with the cannons properly, if you can deal with explosives on that ledge next to the cannons properly, you will win this dungeon. You will beat the other team in the main execution of this dungeon. So really, everything we're seeing right now just doesn't matter, Salute.
Okay, well, I'll see you next week then, Zyra. Have a good night. Team 430 about to finish off their bloodlust here. Sanguine hitting 45% as One Last Chance finishes with the boss. They get ready to likely run past the Void Emissary. There is one tucked in there now. If I'm not mistaken, we are in a Void-heavy week in this dungeon yet. We can see the icon down there. So a very dangerous amount of Void Emissaries in this dungeon. Now, this dungeon specifically does have a lot of line of sight spots where you can easily deal with Void Emissaries, but I mean, we've learned time in and time out, if you can avoid one entirely, then just don't deal with it. It's a huge time dump. It's a huge health dump. It does give you a bit of percentage, but it's just not worth the time investment, especially because they're stationary and extremely dangerous to your team. They can easily give to someone. So 9% trash on the board as One Last Chance. Gets double true CC with double sap up on the stairs, and they already start running over in order to get as quickly to, I was just about to say get as quickly as they can to Jess Hallis' floor, but it looks like they're actually dedicating a pull prior to that, Zyro.
Yeah, the only reason I can see them doing this pull is for there's actually a couple different reasons for it. Number one, they probably aren't that confident in their lead strategy and pulling as much trash as we see some of the bigger teams do. And on top of that, by pulling this thug and his patrolling pack, you actually have access to more gates on the left side as well, which means you can get more of those buffs that are offered from the inmates on this floor. So there's a couple good reasons for this. So I kind of like to see them do it. And honestly, this pull isn't necessarily that dangerous as long as you're dealing with the strikers, keeping them in check. So I mean, they dealt with it perfectly. I don't think that's a bad pull at all.
No, I actually totally agree with you. I think it's smart play for them as Cinderella procs cheat death on the side of Team 430 right now. They're dealing with the Void Emissary in the hallway here and all of these parasites that do a tremendous amount of damage. Inspiration barely hanging on. They add a stacking damage over time nature effect. Another pulse goes off. Nobody dies here, but just so much strain on Kiki, who's actually getting substantially out healed by Inspiration, just spamming Ignore Pain for the life of him right now and making sure that I believe he's running double defensives. He's probably running Edict and that Urchin, so huge amounts of healing per second done by the Warrior there, and finally surpassed by the rest to do it at the end. Again, not exactly the most efficient pull. Reynon's in a bit of trouble here on One Last Chance, but they do manage to get the skip off.
Yeah, someone's going to have to clean up the floor in that chair in the production room, because Tettles is probably tearing his hair out right now, seeing Team 430 pull another Void Touch Emissary and actually killing it. I mean, that's just so inefficient time-wise to single target a mob down. Why wouldn't you put it in with your skip? Why wouldn't you skip past everything in Shadow Meld? That's just not what you want to see. However, other things that you don't want to see is happening on the side of One Last Chance, where they're actually having essentially a full team wipe. They did get a battle rest off on the healer, but he has a Shadow Meld available, so he should be fine.
Does he?
He does. It says, yeah, the party says he has it, but...
it blinded the Arsonist. I'm not sure why he's not using it.
He just now used it, and the Rogue is going to have to go down.
But that explosive is going to kill him. Oh, okay, the Rogue killed the explosive before he got killed by the Arsonist.
Okay, big play from...
Oh my god, if we could play some Benny Hill music, this would be the time. But One Last Chance, 21% on trash here in a very, very sloppy skip. We saw them have trouble with their skip in Motherlode as well, going to Rigs of Flux Flame, so it just doesn't seem to be their strong suit, but they did manage, kudos to them to still salvage it. And instead of having a complete wipe and starting over from the checkpoint where the first boss is, Sanguine, where they killed that, Team 430 here is moving through the floor. They have 0 deaths. They're moving, as usual, slow and steady as they move up to the floor full of buffs, which is, of course, one floor below Jess Hallis's. That is where One Last Chance resides right now. And they don't have a monk. I don't think they have anybody on the team right now that could pull Jess Hallis through the wall.
That's exactly what I was just going to mention. Neither of the teams have a Windwalker monk available. They don't have that Flying Serpent kick available to them to pull Jess through the wall, so they're going to have to work their way through this floor and pull everything individually, all the packs that they would normally skip. So both of these teams are going to get a lot more trash percentage than we normally see from the higher end teams here, and they're not going to have to do too much with the cannons. I wouldn't be surprised to see them pull like maybe half of the size of a pull that we see from your Buffalo Nerf Rogue team that we saw earlier today. So they're probably going to be something like 40 or 45% trash by the time they get to the cannons here.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just double checking once again. Kiki's still running that Guardian Affix as well, just for the extra safety in this dungeon. Team 430, 23% trash. They're dealing with the same pull that we saw One Last Chance to earlier, consisting of the Thug and, of course, several of these looters and strikers at the bottom in the buff area. Now, it does allow them, I really don't hate this, and I think we've seen some Western teams do this too, because it does open up those buffs. And in an MDI world where we try to keep things as consistent as possible, so Waycrest Manor, the top left is always open, etc., this is still one thing that does succumb to RNG. So the buff alignment of where they line the cells can be randomized. So, of course, these teams looking for the Fortitude buff and the Battle Shout buff, importantly, because of the heavy melee comps they're running. Those are absolutely crucial for the teams, and they want to make sure they get those. It just helps tremendously with clear time and safety for the rest of the dungeon. One Last Chance, brute forcing one of the Void Touch Demissaries in the corner that you see most teams skip as a result of not having that pull through the wall on Just Howless.
Yeah, they pretty much have to do this at some point, because in order to run through Just Howless's room while the boss is transitioning from phase 1 to phase 2, you run right by that Void Touch Demissary. On top of that, it's kind of a pain to leave there if you're trying to deal with this trash. Like, they have to because of their comp. So, yeah, it totally makes sense that they'll deal with it. And, of course, problem with Void Touch Demissaries usually is when we see 430 single targeting them down all the time. At least One Last Chance cleaved it with some trash, so it's not too obscenely inefficient for them. It's just not one of the most efficient mobs to deal with in general. But they're still playing relatively clean outside of that one mishap they had.
Yeah, and I'm just taking a look here. I mean, just Inspiration has been holding onto his avatar for so long right now, and he is running, obviously, anger management, which is what most teams run, and he's running vision on top of it. So, I mean, you're supposed to see those avatars fired off like it's no one's business all the time. You have a huge amount of uptime, and Inspiration is just being very, very greedy with it, very stingy. I'm not sure why. That's just a huge amount of damage loss, and likely some defensive as well if he's running the Mastery Azure trade. But One Last Chance here, 39% right now. It looks like they were pulling off the rest of the hallway, consisting of the double C speaker. I don't know if the Wardian is still in there. It looks like they've killed the Warden off, fortunately for them. They still have an Arsonist in the corner. I'm not sure if they forgot about it or they're just going to pull it with the boss, but it is kind of a solo unit at the end of the hall that they'll have to deal with. As Team 430 has now joined them on Just Howless's floor and is getting ready to chew through the floor themselves. Once again, as Zyra mentioned, there is no Windwalker or Monk present at all in these groups, meaning they cannot do the through the cage or through the wall pull on Just Howless. They're forced to clear the floor, including that Void Emissary, which Team 40 is quite good at doing so far.
I mean, we've seen them kill, I think, more Void Emissaries than any other team combined in the MDI this season, so they're very practiced at it. And actually, One Last Chance opting for a relatively sort of dangerous pull, which is not something we've seen from either of these teams, pulling trash on top of the boss. I mean, it's efficient, and I think the big thing we're going to look out here is especially, can they kill the Arsonist before they phase Just Howless at 70%? Because you do get stunned for 6 seconds once the boss phases, and if that boss stuns you and there's something wailing on your tank, there's a chance he can go down.
And it's raging on top of it.
It's also raging. Yeah, they really need to make sure they finish it off, or they just don't get into raging at all.
But we actually saw that be a problem in the East last Cup too, when last this season, when we still had what was the name of that?
This timing is awful.
Yeah,
they're going to push right as it rages.
Yeah, but okay, one mob I don't think will kill him, but there is a raging Arsonist on top of it. It's going to smack Strauss a couple times right now. Not for too much significant damage. They do manage to kill off the explosive, but why am I forgetting the name of the Season 2 affix right now? Yes, Reaping, thank you. So it actually happened a few times in the last season with Reaping hitting the tank. They would transition Jess with a ton of Reaping on top of the tank would die. So similar fears that Zyra had here, but one Arsonist is not enough to output enough damage, even raging on this 18 fortified with the amount of gear that these players have on the tournament realm. 45% here. Finally, Bloodlust comes out of One Last Chance, as Just Howless is at 50% in just a moment here. They have to be careful to really babysit the explosives. This is where one of the dangers comes in of explosives. This, and of course we'll see it later on the cannon area, just if too many explosives spawn, it's going to give someone to the cannon, it's going to give somebody not line of sighting here on Just Howless. Many things can go wrong, but they seem to be handling it quite well, as Team 430 is now only dealing with the Void Emissary in the corner of this floor.
Yeah, I mean, this camera angle has been we've seen some bad things happen from this camera angle on One Last Chance's side a lot of times this entire year, so seeing them deal with those explosives like you mentioned, I mean, it's very, very refreshing to see. Very calm, collected. I mean, even after the flashing tag, you saw Tayro run out, deal with the explosive, no problem. Even though he probably didn't have to, they were all line of sight of it. But it's just safety play in case someone else was sticking their head out a little bit, making sure you deal with any possible problems in the group. And of course, because they're playing safe, because they're dealing with all the explosives, you see Just Howless going down. Now, if thinking about how much trash there is on the ledge, they don't really have to pull that much in this top floor. They probably only need to pull like an extra 15% or so trash count from this top floor, which is a far cry from the extra like 50% we normally see teams pull from the top floor here. So interested to see exactly how they plan on pulling this ledge. Unfortunately, Cuddle's going down while they're doing the trash skip, but you know, that's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
No, especially because you can do mass res through the wall. You don't need line of sight in order to mass res a unit as long as it's within 100-yard radius, spherical, might I add. So you see some teams going, you know, up and down floors of where the healer is, and that's no problem for one last chance here as they get their 6th death on the board, but they're already starting off with the cannon floor. Now, first I need to get rid of this Void Emissary in the corner that is very meanly put here, but must be dealt with. There is room to line of sight it on the edges just by a bit, but the players want to be as aggressive as possible and get it down quickly. You can survive when you're full health 2 hits of the Void Emissary. It'll get you quite low, but it is safe. But the tank is someone that probably doesn't want to do that, because we have seen random gives occur on tank with just, you know, a couple melees or shots from the officers coming in, and of course from the Marines. That in combination with the 2-stack can get pretty rough right now, but they seem to be handling it well. Void Touched Emissary has been handled, and they also pulled the 2 officers, which is one of the 2 packs on the long side of the balcony here. Not sure why they opted to deal with those first, but we do know those officers are quite pesky, for lack of a better term, Zara, just because of the handcuff plus riot shield.
Yeah, I mean, both of those are a big problem. It was actually the handcuff that was kind of messing up Abracadabra's pulls last week.
Right.
The handcuff, I mean, once it's on you, you can't get it off unless you go and interrupt it, and you can't interrupt it yourself because you're silenced by the handcuff. So it persists through walls once you go around corners. You just, once it's on you until the cast ends. So it's a really difficult cast to deal with. Something I'm specifically looking at is while they were dealing with that Void Touched Emissary, both rogues committed their Cloak of Shadows to that Void Touched Emissary's second cast. So if they're opting to do a big cannon pull, they won't have the cloak available for any explosives that spawn while they're in the cannon. So that's a little unfortunate from them, and it looks like they're gearing up to do that large pull here.
To be fair, the cloak is what I think, is it a 90 or 120? I think it's a 120-second cooldown, right? It's a 2-minute cooldown. So, I mean, Tay-Rogue both rogues probably have about 30 to 40 seconds left on the cooldown. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot of time, but that's just enough time that they've already done and committed to the big pull here that they're not going to have it available, at least for this round of canyoneering, if you will. Explosives are starting to go off right now as the team starts to head off, but it looks like they're handling the cannon quite well. Really well done by them. Actually, they're perfect, almost perfect. The officers are just about to be finished off. Perfect pull by them. Excellent Ursul's Vortex. We did see the Typhoon used from Raynans as well, just to punt a couple of those pesky mobs that got out early in the back. Still personally a fan of Mass Root for the strategy here, but they made it work, and that's no problem for them as we see Shars run in and pre-pop shield wall on top of the officers and the 2 flame casters that cannot be interrupted because of the presence of Emissary Tides. And I gotta say, those blazes hit the tank quite hard. He knows the danger of that. He uses Spell Reflect early and then immediately pops shield wall. Good play from him.
Oh, he's also just gone too. He's not anywhere near.
I don't even know where he is.
He's around the corner.
What year is this?
He's just now coming back in. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was really well executed from them, and I want to say as well, it's a lot easier to execute mobs sitting on top of each other when there's less of them, obviously, as well. I think part of the reason we see people using that Typhoon is because what you can actually do is you can Typhoon everything out of an Ursul's Vortex, and then everything will be perfectly stacked on top of that center of Ursul's Vortex. Not to mention Ursul's also has the slow attached to it as well, so it's just a really good tool for making sure everything is right on top of each other. And even if you just get 1 or 2 cannon shots on everything, that's enough to make it worth it in and of itself. I think the root is also good, like if you have other forms of CC as well, but whenever you're not running like a Frost Mage, I think it's something you kind of have to.
Yeah, Frost Mage, or to be fair, a Monk as well, because that Ring of Peace groups them together nicely. So I do appreciate what you're saying. You're absolutely right about grouping them together because they don't have the luxury of a Ring of Peace or a Ring of Frost or a Blizzard coming in from the either a Monk or a Mage, one of those two. So Officer finally getting interrupted here for the handcuff is enraged right now. Shars knows they can hit quite hard and already starts heading off to the second cannon. Group sits at 80%. Now, they need to have in the high 80s, I believe 88 or 89, in order to have enough trash left over after Knight Captain Valeri, third boss of the dungeon. And that's including needing to kill that Void Emissary that resides in the corner after the third boss. Team 430 here, they have 1 death on the board. Bobby Howlis they actually just finished Jess. I was like, why is Bobby still there? But Jess had just died. Bobby takes a bit to despawn is usually what happens once Jess dies. And they've finished off that second boss. So they are heading up to the cannon area as well. But they pop Bloodlust on the on the pack leading up to... Okay, this pack is usually always skipped. It's something you see in live keys. It is a dangerous pack. There's Officer in there. There's a Thug in there. But to commit Bloodlust to this and Emissary of the Tides in there, I mean, it makes sense because it's dangerous, but why are you dealing with this in the first place, really, especially when you're already at 65% trash and you have the cannons coming up, Zyro?
I mean, watching Team 430 more and more, I mean, we've seen them a lot this Cup with the way they're playing, which is a little bit surprising, but they've been clean with their play, not necessarily fast with their play. So it makes a little sense with kind of the inconsistent we've seen from other teams. But watching the way they play, it just seems like they're really... they don't like skipping, or maybe they're not confident in their ability to do skips. Maybe they just, in their practice, they aren't able to pull off skips consistently, so they say, okay, instead of skipping this, we're just going to commit cooldowns to it. It's really weird to see. I don't really know what to think of this. I don't think it's good, but if it works for them, it works for them, I guess.
I mean, it works. Bars like they missed the demoralizing shout interrupt on the Thug. It debuffs the entire group with 50% damage done reduction for 7 seconds. Nobody was dispelling it. I mean, the pull itself is dangerous. It was still done sloppily. They killed it. No deaths on the board, but that'll put them down to, 74% trash in just a second? 73% trash. And, I mean, they only need 15% more trash, which is probably the amount that's on the balcony. Actually, probably even more than they need on the balcony. They have to chew through that. So here comes the double true CC right now. Cinderella goes through. We get a cage, of course, from I Have No Phone and the sap from Cinderella. They immediately mess stealth. They go past the Marine there on the side, and now they're just starting to probably chew through very slowly on their cannon play. But One Last Chance has dealt well with the cannon play. They're sitting at 90% trash. Night Captain Valeria's pulled. She's at 90% as well. I mean, once again, this looks like it'll be One Last Chance's game. I want to throw in a Zyro curse them early, even though they're behind in deaths by 25 seconds, but they're just so far ahead at this point.
we can't start calling that Zyroing. There's already way too many other things that are Zyroing, so we can't call them that. Yeah, they're at 90% trash, which means they don't actually have to deal with the Void Touched Emissary. All they have to do is deal with all the trash around the Void Touched Emissary, which is a little awkward because, you know, your rogue, while it's always in the cannon, is going to be hit by the Void Touched Emissary, but that's not that big of a deal. We saw Buff 4 Nerf Rogue pull it off earlier, but, I mean, saying that the best team in the tournament can pull it off and then say, expecting that one of the lesser ranked teams can pull it off too is maybe asking for a little much, but we'll have to see if they're able to pull it off. It's a little scary to have someone always hit by the Void Touched Emissary, but they can pop out, cloak off their stacks, not take any damage from the second cast. It should be something that's okay. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Of course, Night Captain Valeri, especially in Fortified, there's really not a whole lot that goes on this boss. As long as you're making sure your barrel placement is fine and you're dodging the Fuse Lighter casts and Center Flames, you're going to be totally fine.
You're going to be totally fine, but it is certainly one of those bosses that Fortified or Tyrannical, that's irrelevant, can very easily spiral out of control. So easy to stay on top of it, but if you don't stay on top of it, then once those barrels start chain reacting together, if you are very slow to move them or you move them improperly in poor positions, then it can get quite out of hand quite early. But One Last Chance, no problem for them here as they hit 10% on the boss, and have also done a very good job pre-positioning the boss out of the corners that are dangerous in order to cleave them down. Night Captain Valeria about to fall here, but speaking of falling, the Fury Warrior over on the side of Team 430 has gone down as well. Kiki going down, explosives going off, and this is going to be a full team wipe on not even a dangerous pull on the balcony. This is just a standard pull that consisted of the Emissary of the Tides and the 2 casters. They mismanaged the explosives, and full team wipe here.
Tuttle just throws his hands up as he walks off the desk, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's just a really weird wipe from them. I mean, usually we'll see like a rogue go and out of combat sap it, and then...
Is it a weird wipe from them?
Okay, maybe it's not that weird of a way. I can see people wiping to Emissary of the Tides if it's not used properly. One Last Chance. They didn't hear that we said they had enough trash percentage. They're opting to just once again kill the Void Touched Emissary, which kind of makes sense. They're far enough ahead in this dungeon where they can commit the time to doing it, so why not just play it safe instead of just having a rogue eat it to the face?
The thing is, to be fair, though, this Void Touched Emissary is in a very poor position. It's guarding the cannon. It's got very dangerous trash on either side that you have to kill, so it makes your life way easier to just get rid of it. We've seen a couple of teams, I think it was Method EU if I'm not mistaken, kind of dance around it constantly, line of sight it every 8 seconds for the cast, kill the trash that way, then go Shadow Meld it off and never deal with it. But that almost just doesn't seem like the trouble if you could just brute force it, get rid of it, and be done with it. Second, the couple of explosives remaining are killed off as One Last Chance goes up to the 2 remaining Marines, the Wardens, at the top, and they pull them down. I don't know how many cannon shots they have left, those are, because they did commit some of the cannon shots downstairs, and I'm also not sure why they didn't just combine everything together in the first place.
Yeah, once again, probably just playing things safe. They know they're ahead in the dungeon. All they got to do is finish off only a couple mobs and then a kind of easy fortified Corgus that shouldn't pose too much of an issue for them. We have to really highlight shouldn't because, I mean, we've had some issues with caster curses. Mainly just me, honestly. It's my fault. But, yeah, it's a much easier boss on Fortified. So, as long as they're able to deal with these Wardens, which, I mean, they only had 2 cannon shots, so like you mentioned, it's going to take a little bit longer than it should. But, once again, just playing it safe. They know they're ahead. they got this locked down as long as they're safe.
And I like to see the Soothe coming out of Reynan, so actually did proc his staff on the trash that they just did combine with the Void Emissary. So not going to have that big juicy hit on Overseer Korgus later on, or you know, frankly, safety net if they get too many doubles of the explosive rounds going out on the players. But one last chance, getting on up to the last boss right now, getting in position quickly and pulling Overseer Korgus in order to try and finish off his dungeon, while Team 430 just having another round of disaster here as Inspiration goes down. I don't know if they're going to be able to finish this off without their tank. They do have a Battle Res available, and finally they get it up, but there's an explosive right in our faces. It is cleaved down by Have No Phone, and they manage to stabilize here as one last chance has popped their Bloodlust. They're halfway through that, and Overseer Korgus is at 75%.
Yep, and I mean, this is definitely, you know, this is really, if you're one last chance, you have to be pretty happy with this. Like, they got knocked out by 430 in the first round yesterday.
But they got back up again.
But they got back, exactly, thank you. They did get back up again. And they're never going to live it down, too. So, yeah, one last chance. I mean, yeah, like we mentioned, Overseer Korgus at 50%. Yeah, I mean, this should be pretty easy for them. As long as they have to get like 4 doubles on a road to die, probably.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Team 430, speaking of dying, I Have No Phone yet again goes down. So that's 8 deaths on the board for them. They still have a bunch of trash left before Valyria. I'm not sure what their cannon shot percentage situation is in terms of energy percent, so how many shots they have. Oh, actually, was that the Valyria trash? That was the Valyria trash. So my bad. So they're going over to Night Captain Valyria. They're already 100% trash. They have a remaining 12% trash worth, and we know they don't know how to, or they refuse to use their Shadow Meld, so they're not going to skip the remaining balcony, which they can, by the way, leading up to Korgus, who, for one last chance, is now at 33%. Everything's going great for them, and they should be closing this one out real soon.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for Team 430, it's not going to be a Cinderella story, and I'm kind of wondering what they're going to be doing after this. Dude, Jack is so angry. I stole his line here. Unfortunately, I'm trying to figure out what they're going to do after this. They can't play Diablo because doesn't have a phone, so I'm not quite sure what they're going to do after this tournament. But I mean, they should be happy with their placement. I think this is going to be top 4 for them. So, yeah, I mean, you know, pretty good placing for Team 430 here, considering how they played the dungeons. They opted for a safer route, and it got them pretty far in the tournament.
I mean, it worked out for them, right? But one last chance. I mean, one last chance certainly playing a lot cleaner than they did yesterday, and that's what you like to see coming out of them. So Overseer Korgus, 3% now. One last chance cleaning this up. They only had a similar mistake, just a full team wipe, almost a full team wipe from their skip, which is